Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California, USA. Her family included her father Mark, mother Eva, and younger sister Annie. After her parents' divorce when she was very young, Polly and Annie lived with their mother in Petaluma, California. As for Mark, he had a new relationship after the divorce, and Polly got along very well with this woman. Overall, their family was very harmonious, and she spent time with both her mother and father, with no problems between them. Polly was a quiet and innocent child who had a few close friends but was generally very shy. However, she found confidence and joy in theater, participating in various school plays and community musicals where she often took the lead role. Her main aspiration is to become a talented musical theater actress. Aside from theater, Polly loves hosting and attending sleepovers with her friends, a regular activity shared among her close-knit group. On October 1, 1993, Polly asked her mother if she could have two friends, Jillian and Kate, over for a sleepover. Her mother agreed, and the two friends arrived at Polly's house in the afternoon. They had dinner together, and the evening went smoothly until Polly's mother went to bed around 9:45 p.m. due to a bad headache. She told the girls that she was going to sleep and asked them to wake her up if they needed any help at any time. After taking 2 sleeping pills, she fell into a deep sleep. The calm night was disrupted after 11 p.m. when Eva, Polly's mother, was jolted awake by the screams of Jillian and Kate. The two girls frantically told her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly away. Eva made an emergency call to the police and then went to check on her other daughter, Annie, who was in her room, seemingly unaware of the incident. When the police arrived, they started questioning Polly's 2 friends, Jillian and Kate. The girls explained they were in a room, select on a Halloween costume and just having fun. As the night wore on, around 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was time to go to bed, and her friends agreed. She offered to get the inflatable bed she and her mom had set up earlier so the 3 could sleep together. However, when Polly opened the door to her room, a man was standing in front of them, holding a knife and not wearing a mask. Since Halloween approached, 3 girls initially thought man's threatening claims were a prank and burst into laughter. However, the man's facial expression quickly turned to anger, causing them to realize the situation was more serious. He swiftly forcing the girls into a room, where he bound their hands and feet with rope. When questioned about who lived in the house, all 3 girls, including Jillian and Kate, provided the same answer: Polly. Next, the man removed the pillowcases from the pillows and placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, preventing them from seeing. He instructed the girls to count up to 1,000, assuring them that he would temporarily take Polly away but return her shortly. Unbeknownst to the man, the girls peered through gaps in the pillowcases and noticed his swift departure. Then, they attempted to release themselves from the restraints. After about 30 minutes of struggle, they managed to break free. Upon escaping the room, they immediately sought out Eva to inform her that her daughter Polly had been taken by the man. Jillian and Kate provided the police with a detailed account of the events. They also gave a brief description of the man, who had not worn a mask and covered his face, allowing the girls to get a clear look at him. As a result, the police were able to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. The investigation at Polly's house did not yield much evidence. Several footprints were found, but they all belonged to Polly, her family members, or friends who had visited the house recently. However, some unusual fibers were discovered on the carpet, which did not match the carpet in Polly's house. Further analysis revealed that these fibers likely came from the carpet of a vehicle. The police then analyzed the cars of individuals who were known to the family and had visited the house, but none of them matched the fibers. This led to the assumption that the fibers were from the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was discovered at the scene. At that time, fingerprinting and DNA technology had not yet advanced to the point where it could be compared to a database. However, the print was preserved for potential future use if a suspect was later identified. In Polly's room, a piece of fabric resembling silk was also found. The fabric had a distinctive pattern and appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors. The police believed this fabric could serve as a valuable clue in the future. A hair was discovered, but its origin remained unknown since DNA analysis was not advanced enough to thoroughly examine it at the time. Polly's case generated one of the largest searches in the United States at that time. Thousands of volunteers joined the search, with 4,000 people combing neighborhoods, vacant lots, and large estates near her home. The police also attempted to locate drivers matching the suspect's description, but all did not bring any results. The police had a narrow 24-hour window to locate Polly after her disappearance, as chances of finding her alive would significantly decrease beyond that time frame. To expedite the investigation, they handed the case over to the FBI and launched an urgent search. However, as the days went by, hopes of a safe recovery Polly began to dwindle. During the investigation, police inquired about witnesses in the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual on the night of the abduction. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the area, describing him as peculiar-looking. They didn't think much of it at the time because they had no reason to believe the man was capable of committing a serious crime like kidnapping. As a result, they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The police shared a sketch of the suspect with the neighbors, based on a description provided by Polly's friends. The neighbors all recognized the man in the sketch. In a separate investigation, the police also questioned the teachers and staff at Polly's school to see if anyone knew the man or had any information about Polly's disappearance. Unfortunately, no one at the school had any knowledge about the man or the incident surrounding Polly's disappearance. The staff members all had alibis for the time in question, and none of them matched the description or resembled the sketch of suspects. The police have conducted a thorough and comprehensive investigation of the case, they comparing a fiber found in Polly's house to the car mats of teachers and school staff vehicles, but unfortunately, no matches were found. Over time, feelings of hopelessness and fear grew, not only for Polly's family but also for the authorities and the general public. Everyone is concerned about the threat this criminal may pose to society, so they demand that the police quickly solve the case. To gather more information, a $200,000 reward was offered to anyone providing information that could aid in locating Polly. This reward was funded by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference to publicly appeal kidnapper for Polly's safe return. At the time, the internet was still in its early stages, and law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were unfamiliar with using the internet to locate missing persons. To assist in the investigation, 3 individuals from California took matters into their own hands. They created and posted a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and an advertisement for a reward for any information that could lead to her safe return. Although social media platforms did not exist at the time, other online communication tools were available. As a result, approximately 25 million people in the United States viewed Polly's picture online. Initially, FBI investigators believed that the internet could play a crucial role in the investigation. Although the disappearance became increasingly well known, but internet users do not bring any valuable information. However, this has attracted many volunteers to help, and telephone switchboards were established with hundreds of information every day. This thing also brings hope in the families of other missing children, who reached out to Polly's family to support and assistance, hoping that by working together, they might be able to find their own missing children. The investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. It has been many weeks since Polly was kidnapped, and they had yet to uncover any leads. The identity of the kidnapper remained a mystery, and without any DNA evidence, they were unable to make a match. Not even a hair or palm print had been left found, leaving them feeling helpless. Finally, a new breakthrough in the case has come. A phone call was called to Polly's father, Mark. On the other end of the line, he heard a girl's voice that sounded uncannily like his daughter's. She claimed to be Polly and told Mark that she was being held at a hotel. The kidnapper had momentarily left her alone, and that's why she was able to contact he. However, before Mark could glean any more information, the girl hung up. Mark immediately rushed to the police station to tell the news. Unfortunately, the FBI at the time lacked the advanced technology to track a call that had already been disconnected. All they could do was wait anxiously for the kidnapper to make another move, so they can only sit and wait for a new call, hoping to trace it. A few hours after the first call, the same girl who had spoken to Mark called again. The police managed to trace the call, but found it odd that the location was not a hotel, as the girl claimed, but a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived and knocked on the door of the house where the call originated, they discovered it was a prank. It turned out a teenage girl, close to Polly's age, lived there, so their voices were similar. She explained that her friends had dared her to do it. The girl was not arrested or taken to the police station. Instead, her parents were advised to monitor her behavior and remind her not to joke about such serious issues. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly disappeared, police received a call from a woman. She reported that she found 3 suspicious items on a several-acre plot of land she owned. The police, along with the FBI, went to the location and found 3 critical pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to one in Polly's room, a pair of ballet shoes that Eva claimed were missing from the house the night Polly vanished, and some duct tape. These evidence led the police to suspect that Polly might have been in the area. Before all this evidence was discovered, on the day Polly disappeared, the same woman went to the police to report a problem. Strangers had been wandering onto her plot of land. She owned a lot of land, which was mostly forest, and had only one small house inside. Although there were signs indicating it was private property, there was no fence to keep people out, so many unknowingly crossed onto her land. Although her land had many intruders, but one particular out in her memory. On the night Polly was abducted, a man drove up to her house in his car, which got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, was the first to notice the man but didn't approach him because she was too scared. The homeowner also didn't approach him, as she thought he looked angry. They decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they interrogated the man about why he was there. He explained that he hadn't realized it was private property and promised to leave quickly. However, he requested their assistance in getting his car out of the mud. The officers noticed that the man seemed very nervous, scared, and sweaty, and he also appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Since they were unable to conduct a drug test at the time and the man was not acting aggressively, they were unable to arrest him. The officers helped him out of the mud, and he eventually drove away. This man was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was troubled due to the violence inflicted by his parents. When he was 12, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him, saying she wanted nothing to do with him, and left him with his father. Richard's father was very irresponsible, often leaving the house for hours or even days. Richard was frequently left alone, sometimes staying with neighbors and sometimes staying with some of his relatives. During his teenage years, Richard began engaging in criminal activities such as stealing and fighting, which led to several months in reform school. At 17, Richard committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the victim's death. The judge offered him a choice: go to reform school or join the U.S. Army. Richard chose the Army but was dishonorably discharged in less than 2 years. As he grew older, his criminal record grew longer. Around the age of 20, he was sentenced to 15 years for robbery and kidnapping, but was released after 1 year on parole for good behavior. During that period, Richard was troubled by another accusation. Many of his friends suspected him of killing a 19-year-old girl named Marlene, even though the police acknowledged that she had left voluntarily. However, those close to Marlene believed Richard was responsible for her death, occurring the night they attended a party together. These were merely rumors, with no evidence to support them. When Polly went missing, Richard was having a difficult time, and he had no fixed address, so his whereabouts were unclear. The police distributed a special leaflet exclusively to officers, urging them to be extremely cautious. They withheld information from the media due to concerns that Richard might flee California or even the United States. On November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol. A police officer stopped him, and he failed a breathalyzer test. Upon checking Richard's name and picture, the officer recognized him as the suspect wanted in the Polly kidnapping case. The officer carefully informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating probation due to drunk driving. Richard complied and was taken to the police station. There, officers read him his rights and revealed that he was actually being held for the kidnapping of Polly. Richard was taken in for questioning. The investigation was careful and he eventually admitted to kidnapping Polly. His palm print matched exactly with the one found at Polly's house, and carpet fibers from his car matched those found in the house. Polly's friends were brought to the police station for questioning and immediately identified Richard as the kidnapper. Additionally, a piece of silk identical to one found in Polly's room was discovered in his car and on the piece of land of the woman who reported the incident to the police. All evidence pointed to Richard, leading he to finally confess. He explained that he had been using substances with friends that day and felt unwell. He decided to break into a house in a neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around until he reached Polly's neighborhood. Seeing an open window, he entered the house. He stated that he hadn't planned the incident, didn't know Polly or her family, and hadn't been following them. He was searching for valuables but didn't find much. As he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard noted that she was very frightened and, in his panic, decided to take her. He stated that he put Polly in his car and started driving, eventually stopping in a vacant lot where he assaulted her. Afterwards, he got back into the driver's seat. When the woman and the babysitter spotted Richard on private piece of land, Polly was in the back seat. Police officers helped him retrieve his car from the mud, and at that point, Polly was still alive, which deeply frustrated officers as they believed her life could have been saved. After the car was pushed out of the mud, Richard drove down the highway, strangled Polly to death, and left her body there. Richard reported the exact location of the grave to the police, leading to a search that took place on December 4, 1993, 2 months 3 days after the girl was abducted. Polly's body was found in a grave beside the highway, dug by Richard himself. The forensic examination mainly confirmed the cause of death as strangulation, consistent with Richard's account. The date of her death was approximately the same day she disappeared. With all the evidence, Richard Allen Davis was put on trial for kidnapping, murdering, and raping Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. Besides apologizing to the family, he accused Polly's father of sexually abusing her. Richard claimed that Polly had told him not to do to her what her father did to her. This accusation enraged Polly's father, who nearly attacked Richard, but the people present compartmented him. Richard's words shocked everyone, not only because he didn't apologize but also because they doubted the truth of his claim about Polly's father. On June 18, 1996, Richard Allen Davis was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Polly Klaas. In August, he was sentenced to death. He tried to overturn the death sentence but failed. In 2006, Richard overdosed on pills in his cell but was revived and returned to prison. In 2009, his lawyer attempted to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Corey Richins. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and his life had a profound impact on those around him. Eric was a sports enthusiast who actively participated in basketball, baseball, and soccer. He had a particular passion for outdoor activities, especially hunting. His love for the outdoors was evident in the numerous trophies he collected from around the world. Eric was a fun-loving person who lived in Utah and enjoyed exploring the outdoors with his many motorized vehicles. He was also deeply committed to his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With his family's support, Eric served a 2-year mission in Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, Eric attended the University of Utah, graduating in 2009 with a degree in international studies and a minor in Spanish. It was during this time that he met Corey Richins, who worked at Home Depot. Eric, who often visited the store for work, developed a friendly relationship with Corey and was drawn to her charm and beauty. However, he was too nervous to approach her directly, so he asked a friend to help him get her contact information. While shopping at Home Depot, a friend of Eric's approached Corey and quietly asked for her phone number, saying that Eric wanted to get to know her better. Eric called Corey and they arranged to meet in person. Eric and Corey clicked immediately when they met. Their connection was real, and their first date marked the start of a wonderful romance. As they met each other's families, their relationship grew even stronger. Corey's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was just as impressed with Corey's kindness and how well she fit in with them. Eric's 2 older sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious of Corey, but they soon grew fond of and accepted Corey. In 2013, Eric and Corey tied the knot in a private ceremony, marking the beginning of their life together. They welcomed their first child, Carter, shortly after. The family continued to grow with the arrival of Ashton and then Weston, completing their happy family portrait. As a father, Eric found his footing quickly. His sons looked up to him and admired everything he did. Eric, in turn, took immense pride in his children's accomplishments, whether it was their academic achievements, sports victories, or creative pursuits. He was always present to support and celebrate their successes. Eric's entrepreneurial spirit led him to start a stonemasonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. As a result, his business attracted many clients, providing financial security for Eric and his family. Corey was a successful real estate entrepreneur who contributed significantly to the family's income. Her expertise in the local market and business acumen made her a valuable partner in their growing family. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them at a profit. The Corey family appeared to have it all, with a lifestyle that seemed perfect on the surface. But beneath this facade, trouble was brewing. On March 4, 2020, the illusion of perfection shattered when Corey called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found that Eric had already passed away. Corey was devastated by the news and immediately called her mother, Lisa, who rushed to her side. Corey's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, also joined them, and together they struggled to come to terms with the loss. Earlier that night, Corey had been celebrating a business success with Eric, marking the purchase of a mansion for her real estate company. Before bed, she had made Eric a Moscow Mule, a drink made with ginger beer and vodka. Corey had gone to bed around 9 p.m., but instead of sleeping in her own bed, she had lain down with her 9-year-old son in his room because he was having nightmares. Curry returned to her bedroom around 3 a.m. and found Eric unresponsive. When she touched Eric, she felt that her husband was extremely cold. Realizing that something was wrong, Curry waited for paramedics to arrive and followed the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric. Curry claimed to have followed the instructions given to her. However, the paramedics were unsure what caused Eric's death, and the lack of information led them to consider the possibility of an aneurysm, given that Eric was a 39-year-old man with no known medical conditions. Further investigation revealed that Eric had complained of chest pains to Curry the night before he died, which initially strengthened the suspicion of an aneurysm. The autopsy results were unexpected and came as a surprise to all parties involved in the case. It was discovered that Eric died from a fatal dose of fentanyl, a powerful painkiller that can be fatal if overdosed. From the moment Eric died, his family began to suspect that his recreational drug use may have contributed to the fentanyl in his system. Curry explained that Eric used a nightly THC gummy as a way to unwind after a long day. However, the family had concerns about where Eric was getting these gummies. They suspected that Eric wasn't always buying them from trustworthy sources, and that he might have been purchasing them on the street instead. Eric's mother-in-law, Lisa, was particularly worried because Eric had a history of recreational drug use and may have also bought pain pills from street vendors without knowing they might contain fentanyl, unknowingly putting his life at risk. Eric's family strongly rejected the allegations, convinced that something else was responsible and encouraging investigators to consider other possibilities. Meanwhile, Curry struggled to rebuild her life. According to her brother Ronnie, she faced numerous challenges, including the void left by her husband's absence. To manage her grief and comfort her children, Curry found a creative outlet. She self-published a children's book, Are You With Me?, on Amazon, aiming to help kids deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a boy missing his deceased father through illustrations and storytelling, allowing Curry to channel her emotions into a positive project. Curry portrayed Eric as a constant, loving presence in her book, watching over their son. Her mother, Lisa, appreciated the book, saying it helped her family cope with their emotions and find some comfort. However, as detectives looked into Eric's death, they suspected foul play was involved. In a shocking twist, Curry was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023, just weeks after she had publicly shared her grief and promoted her book on local Utah news stations. The community was stunned by the news, struggling to understand the sudden turn of events. Curry, who initially gained public sympathy for her efforts to help children cope with loss, has become embroiled in a devastating scandal. According to court documents, Curry allegedly killed her husband Eric by administering a lethal dose of a poison. Curry intentionally spiked Eric's drink, a Moscow Mule, with a fatal amount of fentanyl on the night of his death. However, Curry's lawyer disputes this, stating that no fentanyl was found on the glassware at their home. Curry denies any involvement in Eric's death, insisting she had no reason to harm him. Curry's mother, Lisa, has expressed shock and confusion over the allegations, maintaining that they was happy and had no issues that would have led Curry to kill Eric. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Curry and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as it appeared. They had their differences, and Curry, a stay-at-home mother, craved independence. She was also annoyed by Eric's frequent hunting trips. Lisa claimed that Eric was having an affair, but his family denied this. They sought counseling, but Eric's family said it was because he loved his sons and wanted to make the marriage work. Eric considered divorce and took steps to protect his assets, secretly setting up a trust with his sister Katie. During the investigation, 6 life insurance policies on Eric were found, totaling $3 million. 2 months prior to his death, Curry had also forged Eric's signature on another policy valued at $100,000. It was also discovered that Curry had been embezzling money from Eric's personal accounts and misusing funds from his business over several years. Curry's financial situation was reportedly dire, despite claims that her house-flipping business was thriving. In reality, the business was millions of dollars in debt. According to Eric's family representative, Curry urgently needed money. A premarital agreement, signed by Curry, revealed that she had waived her claim to Eric's business assets. However, if Eric were to die before her while they were still married, she would inherit the assets. Curry's lawyer denied the claims that her business was in debt. They explained that taking out lines of credit was a normal part of the house-flipping business, and that the debt would be paid off when the houses were sold. The lawyer also clarified that the large amount of debt mentioned by the spokesperson was simply a result of normal business transactions. Curry's mother, Lisa, stated that Eric had been very supportive of Curry's business ventures, especially when it came to buying Heejin, where they were celebrating on the night of his death. Heejin was situated on a 10-acre estate in Heber Valley, close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. Curry discovered a long-abandoned mansion that had been built in 2017. She joined forces with a group of investors to make a substantial offer on the property, using their collective resources to finance the purchase. Her plan was to transform the estate into a popular recreational destination. Although Eric initially seemed to support the purchase, his family later disputed this claim. They recalled that Eric had strongly opposed the idea of buying Heejin and had even argued with Curry about it. The family's spokesperson made a shocking allegation: on the night of Eric's death, Curry had given him a drink spiked with fentanyl. Furthermore, they claimed that this was not the first time Curry had attempted to harm Eric. Eric's family claims Curry tried to harm him twice. First, during a 2019 trip to Greece, they say Curry gave Eric a drink that made him violently ill. Curry's brother Ronnie disputes this, suggesting Eric was taking antibiotics and shouldn't have had liquor. Ronnie says the bartender may have made a mistake, preparing a drink with liquor instead of the virgin drink Eric ordered. A second incident allegedly occurred on Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month before Eric's death. Curry brought Eric a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and have trouble breathing. The court documents stated that 2 days after Eric's death, Curry punched his sister Amy in the neck and face when she tried to open a safe containing between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. Curry claimed she was acting in self-defense when she tried to retrieve important documents from a safe. However, she was charged with assault a month after the incident and eventually pleaded no contest. In June 2023, Curry attended a bail hearing, which lasted 4 hours. During the hearing, prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to support their claim that Curry had poisoned her husband. A cell phone expert testified about Google searches found on Curry's phone, including inquiries about retrieving deleted text messages from an iPhone, whether the FBI could access deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Curry's attorney argued that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Curry sought information to defend herself against accusations of murder. Prosecutors also contacted the lead detective involved in the case and questioned him about any potential sources that Curry could have used to obtain the drugs that were used to kill Eric. The detective shared information from an interview with Carmen Labor, a woman who claimed to work as a cleaner for Curry's business and home. In early 2022, Carmen told investigators about a conversation she had with Curry. Curry asked her to buy fentanyl for an investor who supposedly had a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation for distributing drugs at the time of the interview, agreed to Curry's request. She said she bought 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and later met with Curry to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day, when Curry allegedly tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. During the investigation, Carmen told the detective that Curry contacted her again, asking for stronger drugs. This time, Carmen revealed that Curry paid her for the pills with a check. A week after Eric's death, Curry gave Carmen a $1,300 check. However, Curry's lawyer disputed this, suggesting that the check could have been for cleaning services instead of payment for drugs. The detective agreed that this was a possible explanation. Curry's lawyer also questioned Carmen's credibility, pointing out that she was a convicted felon on probation for serious crimes. The lawyer argued that Carmen's history made her an unreliable witness. They claimed that Carmen might have lied about selling the drugs because the detective told her she would face a long prison sentence if she didn't cooperate with the investigation. Curry's lawyer asked if there was any physical evidence to prove that Carmen had bought the drugs. The detective replied that no such evidence existed. Specifically, no text messages were found where Curry directly asked Carmen for drugs. Additionally, no witnesses came forward to confirm that they saw Carmen and Curry exchanging drugs. Eric's sister pleaded with the judge at the bail hearing to keep Curry in custody, sharing the family's trauma and concerns about reliving the horrific circumstances of Eric's death if Curry was released on bail. The judge granted the request and denied Curry bail. However, Curry's family was upset by the decision and worried about her well-being in jail. They felt that her time in custody was affecting her physically and mentally. Curry experienced a health scare in jail after taking prescribed medication. She suffered a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. She claimed that jail officials had given her the wrong medication, leading to severe side effects. Thankfully, Curry recovered after receiving medical treatment. Jail officials found a handwritten letter in Curry's cell after she was hospitalized. The letter was never sent, but it was included in the court records and presented by prosecutors as evidence. They claimed it was written by Curry to her mother and showed her intentions and motivations. Prosecutors asked the court to limit Curry's contact with her mother and brothers in November 2023. The main reason was the letter found in Curry's cell, which prosecutors said was an attempt to influence witnesses. They alleged that in the letter, Curry gave her mother instructions on how her brother Ronnie should behave in court. Curry allegedly asked Ronnie to lie about Eric's behavior during a trip to Mexico. Specifically, Curry wanted Ronnie to falsely testify that Eric had admitted to buying pain pills in Mexico. Curry also told Ronnie to gather text messages from Eric that discussed his drug use. Curry stressed the importance of linking Eric's activities in Mexico to his alleged involvement with drugs. However, Curry claimed that the letter was not an attempt to tamper with a witness, but rather a work of fiction. A judge agreed, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove that Curry was attempting to interfere with the testimony. Currently, Curry and her family are trying to gain custody of their 3 sons, who are living with a relative. Despite being in jail, Curry regularly talks to her children through video calls. Her family attends their public events, but is not allowed private visits with they. Curry faces severe penalties if found guilty of murdering her husband Eric by lacing his drink with fentanyl. She could receive a prison sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. Moreover, she is dealing with multiple civil lawsuits related to Eric's estate, including disputes over custody of their children. The outcome of these custody battles has significant financial implications, as control of the children grants control over Eric's estate, fueling tensions between Curry's and Eric's families. Curry's trial is expected to begin sometime in 2025. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Zara Alina. Zara Alina was born in England in the winter of 1986. As the eldest of 5 children, Zara's birth held great significance, symbolizing her mother's aspirations for a better future. Additionally, she was the first granddaughter of Radha Parvin, a distinction that earned her special respect and status within the family. Growing up, Zara was doted on by her relatives and raised in a multi-generational household. Despite their financial struggles, Zara's parents prioritized her education, believing it would provide her with a good life. Zara's family had big plans for her future, but their hopes were overshadowed by the dangers and difficulties that surrounded them, putting Zara's safety at risk. Zara had an unrelenting passion and thirst for life from a very young age. This led her to develop a love for tap dancing, a form of self-expression where each step brought out a rhythm that evoked a sense of harmony. Additionally, and swimming, which gave her a sense of freedom from the monotony of daily life. Her exquisite style and artistic approach to fashion allowed her to express her dreams through her outfits. However, these pursuits were just the beginning of her journey. Her first experience with skating ignited a new sense of freedom within her. Skating evolved into more than just a hobby for her. It became a powerful outlet for self-expression, allowing her to connect with her deepest emotions and inner self. Those close to Zara were unsurprised when she shared her aspiration to become a lawyer, driven by a desire to protect and support others. Her warm personality spread happiness and positivity, making those around her feel uplifted and inspired. Zara's eyes sparkled, and her gaze was captivating. Her curly black hair added to her striking appearance. She has a magnetic appeal, combining qualities such as passion, kindness, and courage, along with undeniable charm. As a teenager, she had the chance to explore England, visiting museums and galleries that fueled her interest in art and culture. Her travels showcased independence and unrelenting passion for knowledge and discovery. Following her initial trips, she later traveled to other parts of Europe. These adventures show that she inherited her family's passion for discovery and exploration of new things. Zara's aunt, Farah, was a significant influence on her. Unlike many others who chose to settle in the UK, Farah settled in Portugal. What captivated Zara was her aunt's work as a psychotherapist, particularly her involvement with women's organizations. As a result, Zara made it a point to visit her aunt on multiple occasions. Zara began turning her dreams into a reality when she earned admission to the University of Westminster immediately after high school graduation. She dedicated herself to pursuing her objectives, all while taking care of her mother and grandmother at the same time. Although she was short, she had endless energy and a deeply passionate personality. Zara is a compassionate person who has positively impacted the lives of many refugees forced to flee their homes due to conflict, she using her influence to speak out about their stories. She also volunteered at community canteens, aiding the homeless. Zara has a remarkable talent for understanding what others need, and she always makes time for them a priority in her busy schedule. Her easygoing personality made her a delight to be around. She frequently visited her aunt, Smee Naz, who lived nearby, often seeking her help with exam preparation, but their study sessions inevitably turned into laughter-filled moments. Those who knew Zara remember that she brought happiness wherever she went. Moreover, she was diligent, covering her own expenses and providing support to her family. Zara was a familiar face at a local clothing store, where she worked and interacted with everyone in the community, from teenagers to the elderly. Her kindness and willingness to help others were notable traits. Despite being talkative, she was a good listener and extended her generosity to all living beings, especially cats. She would often spend her own money to care for stray cats, taking them to the vet or convincing neighbors to adopt them. Zara's friend, Sanji Naira, described her as radiant and thought that her most significant gift was her ability to share optimism with others. Whenever Sanji was down, he would turn to Zara for help. Zara had a special person in her life, Carissa Peters, who was more than just a friend. They formed a strong bond as they fought together for justice and women's rights, a common goal that forged a lasting friendship despite life's obstacles. They felt a strong sense of comfort and familiarity in each other's homes and maintained a daily phone routine, using this time to share news, discuss their thoughts, and make plans for the future. After passing her exams and completing her law internship in 2002, Zara had the opportunity to work at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a significant step toward realizing her dream of becoming a full-fledged lawyer. To achieve this, Zara persevered with her work despite facing many difficulties, including worries from her mother and grandmother, as well as financial struggles. This achievement was significant for her and for the people who believed in, supported her through the challenges she faced on her path to a better life. On her first day at the new job, Zara felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. She shared a smiley selfie with friends and family, as if announcing the start of a new chapter in her life to the world. This new job was the final piece in the puzzle of her dreams, a culmination of years of hard work. Although being an administrator might seem like a secondary role to some, it was a significant milestone for Zara. At 35 years old, she entered a new phase of her life, which sparked in her a sense of excitement and determination that filled her with a clear direction and goal. This wasn't just another working day. It marked the beginning of a new era in her life, one where she felt truly fulfilled and happy. The new job boosted Zara's confidence, and she felt it was time to start her own family. She envisioned her children living happy, protected lives filled with love and harmony. With each passing day, Zara saw herself moving closer to her dream of having a family. Her life was busy with work, volunteering, friends, and support from her mother and grandmother, who shared her home and provided care when needed. Despite her packed schedule, Zara enjoyed walking and valued her freedom of movement. She didn't let small things hold her back and would often carry a spare pair of shoes in her bag to change into sneakers when needed. Zara believed that women should be able to move freely without any obstacles or restrictions. However, a man named Jordan McSweeney, who lived nearby, posed a threat to Zara's freedom. Jordan was a few years younger than Zara, and his origins were unknown. One Saturday evening, after the sun had set, Zara was on her way to meet a friend. Despite not being in the mood, but she chose not to cancel, honoring her commitment. Zara was recognized for being extremely reliable and keeping her commitments, especially to her friends. Before leaving, she called Aunt Farah, but this time, a hint of anxiety crept into her voice. Aunt Farah cautioned Zara to be careful, and although she wasn't venturing far from home, the evening atmosphere felt unusual and unpredictable. Zara assured herself that she was familiar with every part of the city and that people knew who she was. Nevertheless, something about this evening unsettled her, making her heart beat faster, and she decided to exercise extra caution. Zara met her friend at the Ilford Big Spoon, a local bar on London's West End, at the scheduled time. Ilford in London is a vibrant and culturally diverse neighborhood ideal for evening meals and socializing. One Saturday evening, Zara and her friend came to this area. They then headed to another bar, where Zara had a couple of glasses of water. Meanwhile, Jordan was at a nearby nightclub, having one drink after another. As he drank, an idea formed in his mind, and he decided to act on it. He was determined to find a woman to attack that night. Security cameras captured Jordan's behavior at the club's entrance, where he would hug and try to kiss women without their consent. He was particularly aggressive with one employee, despite her clear discomfort. Eventually, he was kicked out of the club around 11 p.m., and his behavior was recorded on camera. After leaving the club, cameras continued to capture Jordan's actions as he walked down Romford Street towards the park. As Jordan walked, he spotted a woman and began to follow her. Jordan approached her, and she tried to avoid him by entering a store. However, Jordan waited for her outside, and when she left the store, he followed her again. He then crossed the street, keeping her in sight. When the woman entered her house, Jordan was forced to continue on his way. According to security footage, around 2 a.m. on Cranbrook Street, Jordan noticed another woman approaching him. Suddenly, Jordan quickened his pace, approaching a woman. However, 2 passing witnesses noticed his suspicious behavior, which was captured on video. Despite this, the woman managed to return home safely, leaving Jordan surprised and frustrated. He then returned to Cranbrook Street, having been unsuccessful. Around the same time, Zara and her friend decided to leave the bar and head home. It was 2 a.m. Her friend took a taxi, but Zara chose to walk, given the short distance and pleasant weather. As they parted ways, Zara began walking down Cranbrook Street, a residential area just a 10-minute walk from her house. It was then that Jordan spotted her. According to Chief Inspector Dave Williams, Jordan had a clear intention that night to attack a woman, regardless of the location. Cranbrook Street remained busy, even in the early hours, with a steady flow of traffic. Jordan had a history of offenses dating back to 2006 to 2009, for which he was sentenced in a Kent juvenile court at the age of 13. In August 2010, at the age of 17, he was found guilty of assaulting a girl, causing her to suffer a swollen eye. He received a 4-month detention and correction period as a result. 11 years after his initial offense, Jordan committed another crime against a woman, resulting in a 3-year ban from approaching her, either directly or indirectly. By 2010, he had a total of 28 convictions for 69 different offenses. These offenses included theft, assault on both police officers and the general public, motor vehicle theft, traffic infractions, committing crimes while out on bail, and shoplifting. Jordan used a social media platform to boast about his extensive collection of weapons and glorify a life of crime. He shared various photos and quotes, as well as fake images claiming the FBI was searching for him. After being imprisoned for crimes including criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and carrying a bladed weapon, Jordan was released on parole on June 17, 2022. One of the conditions of his parole was to regularly meet with his assigned parole officer. Following his release, Jordan resided in a van on St. Valentine Street, located in a 130-acre park in the Gun Hill area of London's Redbridge district, the largest green space in the region. Jordan broke all the rules of his parole and missed 2 scheduled meetings with his parole officer. As a result, the authorities decided not to show him any mercy. On June 22, 2022, the parole service started the process to send Jordan back to prison, but they didn't notify the police until 2 days later. On the morning of Saturday, June 25, 2022, police went to his mother's house to arrest him, only to find he was not there. In the early hours of June 26, 2022, a horrific crime occurred in Ilford. Zara was discovered on the sidewalk, displaying signs of abuse, with her belongings scattered around her. Her body showed evidence of severe injuries, her clothes were torn, and her eyes indicated a desperate struggle for survival. A passerby immediately recognized the gravity of the situation and began administering chest compressions and CPR in an attempt to save Zara's life. Despite the efforts of passers-by and emergency medical responders, Zara's injuries proved too severe. She fought for her life but ultimately passing away at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. At approximately 11 a.m., security cameras in the park captured Jordan disposing of evidence, including his clothes, with an air of indifference and calmness. This behavior suggested that the act of violence was premeditated rather than random. The police swiftly responded and visited Zara's grandmother, asking her to identify her granddaughter from video footage taken at the bar. Upon confirmation of Zara's identity, the police informed her grandmother about the incident. Zara's uncle Kasim then contacted other family members, including Aunt Farah in Portugal, to break the news. Farah recalled receiving the distressing call on Saturday night, which prompted her to immediately travel to London. The family was deeply shocked and struggling to cope with the intense sadness of Zara's passing. Concurrently, detectives initiated an investigation in the area where Zara's body was found. They began by gathering footage from surveillance cameras to reconstruct the attacker's movements. The combination of video evidence and bloody fingerprints discovered near the crime scene enabled the identification of Jordan as the primary suspect. Utilizing a video surveillance system, the police tracked Jordan's location and obtained images of him. Inspector Dave dispatched an officer to Gun Hill to verify if anyone recognized Jordan. The operation yielded swift results, as Jordan was found sleeping in his van shortly thereafter. The authorities immediately arrested Jordan, who was found with blood-stained clothes and shoes that he was trying to dispose of. Despite lengthy interrogations, he refused to speak or reveal any information about himself. Meanwhile, new video footage emerged, allowing police to piece together the incidents surrounding the crime. The incident led parole officer Justin Russell to criticize the handling of Jordan's case, highlighting a series of errors. Jordan has a criminal history dating back to the age of 16 and has been in prison several times, making him a subject at high risk of committing a crime. After being released from detention, he missed several scheduled supervision appointments. Authorities failed to take prompt action to return him to prison. Zara's family described the last few days as incredibly shocking, acknowledging that their loss was irreparable. However, in the face of such grief, they were touched by the warmth and kindness people have shown. The family faced a significant amount of work and needed to find the strength to cope. Aunt Farah took charge of communicating with the media and meeting with the police. Even though they were dealing with their own shock and grief, the family understood that taking control of the situation was crucial to protect Zara from possible accusations by some media outlets. A preliminary hearing for the Jordan case occurred on July 1, 2022. A subsequent hearing was scheduled for September 30, 2022, to prepare testimonies for the trial. However, the trial was postponed because Jordan did not appear on the scheduled day. On July 2, a memorial service was held for Zara, organized by her family. The service took place along the route Zara would have taken home, representing her final, unfinished journey. Many attendees wore white to symbolize a silent walk. Over 120 organizations that specialize in supporting women attended, showing solidarity in the fight against violence. These organizations collaborated with Zara Alina's family and publicly pushed for justice and accountability. They stressed that it's crucial to address violence against women and stopping perpetrators from committing such acts. During a preliminary hearing at East London Court in Walthamstow, crime scene investigator Nadia Persat testified. She stated that local police officers could have done more to locate Jordan before he attacked Zara. Persat believes the jury should investigate this matter further. On November 16, 2022, Jordan failed to appear at the hearing, despite being informed that his attendance was mandatory. As a result, a video call was arranged, during which he pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow argued that Jordan would be unfit for bail, and Judge Chima Grave agreed. The judge postponed the verdict until December 14 of the same year. However, as that date approached, Jordan failed to appear in court. Despite his absence, Jordan was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years for the murder of Zara Alina. Jordan and his representatives appealed the sentence, which was subsequently reduced to 33 years in prison. The judge took into account that Zara was unconscious at the time of her death and therefore did not experience any suffering, which was a key factor in the decision to reduce the sentence. For months after the incident, it was revealed that Jordan had a personal relationship with a 32-year-old woman who worked at the Belmarsh Correctional Facility in South London. The woman, who was not a direct employee of the prison services but worked at the facility, was arrested and investigated for suspected misconduct in a public office. Zara Alina's family still fondly remembers her with love and pride. Her aunt, Farah, continues to advocate against violence towards women and girls. In March 2023, Farah participated in a march organized by various groups to raise awareness about the issue. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jimia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jimia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in the fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jimia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her fourth daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shannon Monty. Shannon Monty was born on April 6, 1997. When she was a young child, her parents immigrated to the United States and settled in Waukesha, Wisconsin, where she grew up and attended school. Her parents thought Waukesha was an ideal place to raise their children because of its friendly atmosphere and good schools. Shannon was a bright, attractive, and outgoing person who made friends easily. After graduating from high school in 2015, Shannon enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She was interested in social work and wanted to help people in need. Despite her busy schedule, she worked part-time at an organic food company with her father. It was there that she met Quentin Neal, a 26-year-old man who shared her passion for helping others. They bonded quickly over their similar values and interests. Shannon had always dreamed of building a shelter for women and children, and Quentin was equally committed to making a positive impact. As their friendship blossomed into romance, they decided to live together. Shannon was thrilled to have found someone like Quentin, who cared deeply for her and made their relationship a happy and fulfilling one. Shannon's parents were making plans with her for their future together until her sudden disappearance. On April 13, 2018, Shannon failed to pick up her younger brother from school and didn't show up for work, which was unusual for her. Her phone was found to be turned off, and she had not informed anyone that she would be missing her shift. Her parents went to the police station the same day, unable to locate their daughter on their own. Initially, detectives thought that Shannon, being young, might have simply run away with friends or taken a spontaneous trip. However, her parents quickly dismissed this idea, as it was out of character for Shannon to cut off contact and ignore her family's worry. Shannon's mother provided crucial details to the investigators, which led them to take the case more seriously and pursue it further. Shannon's room still contained some of her money, documents, and valuables, which was a concerning factor in her disappearance. When questioned, Shannon's parents revealed that her boyfriend was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. When investigators contacted Quentin by phone, he claimed to have no knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts. Shannon had been living with her parents, and Quentin said he hadn't seen Shannon that day. The investigators asked Quentin to come to the police station for questioning. Quentin appeared anxious and agreed to come immediately. When he arrived, Shannon's parents were still present. Quentin told the investigators that the last time he saw Shannon was over 24 hours ago, when she left his house to pick up her little brother from school. The investigators asked Quentin if he knew where Shannon might be, but he didn't have any idea. However, he did remember that another man had been interested in Shannon, despite knowing she was in a relationship and pregnant. According to Quentin, this man continued to pursue Shannon even after she told him to leave her alone. The next day, the police began interviewing Shannon's friends to gather more information. They also distributed details about the search for Shannon to all police stations in Wisconsin. Later that day, they found a disturbing discovery that Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, about 20 minutes from her home. Forensic investigators thoroughly examined the car but found no signs of a crime, such as a carjacking or struggle. Shannon's purse and phone were missing, but they did find fingerprints from 3 people: Shannon, Quentin, and an unknown individual. The man mentioned by Quentin was brought in for questioning. He claimed to be distraught over Shannon's disappearance, but denied Quentin's allegations, saying they were merely friends and never pursued a romantic relationship. However, a significant break in the case came when Angshuman, Shannon's mother, found Shannon's Apple Watch and reviewed Shannon's text messages. She took the watch to the police station, allowing investigators to examine it further. The investigators discovered that Quentin and Shannon had arranged to meet on the day she went missing, contradicting Quinton's earlier statement. The text messages also revealed that Quinton had been abusive towards Shannon, although she was pregnant with his child. Quinton had apologized for his behavior and begged her not to leave him. The investigators suspected Quinton was not a good person due to his criminal history, including a prison sentence for robbery and multiple arrests for assault and minor offenses. Shannon's parents had become increasingly suspicious of him as they noticed their daughter was often depressed. Quinton's emotional instability regarding the baby Shannon was expecting only added to their concerns. After Shannon told her parents about the pregnancy, they met with Quinton, who promised to care for both Shannon and the baby. However, Shannon's mother later discovered severe bruising on her daughter's arms and learned that Quinton was responsible for the injuries. When Shannon's cell phone was last detected near Quinton's residence on April 13th, the investigators became worried they might not find her alive. They quickly obtained a search warrant and searched Quinton's house, but initially found no signs of a crime scene or struggle, as the place was clean and appeared normal. Forensics investigators used luminol on the first floor, but it revealed no evidence. However, when they applied it to the basement, they found numerous traces, strongly suggesting that Shannon was likely deceased. Quinton Neal was subsequently arrested and taken into custody. Before questioning him, investigators analyzed his phone records, discovering that he had recently searched online for ways to remove evidence of a crime using a certain chemical. He was apparently trying to conceal his involvement. During the interrogation, Quinton repeatedly denied any knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts and claimed to have no connection to her disappearance. The investigators finally had concrete evidence, which led Quinton to change his story. He eventually agreed to confess to the crime, but he claimed he acted in self-defense when he took Shannon's life. Quinton explained that Shannon had visited his house to discuss their future and their child. However, the conversation turned into an argument, and Shannon went into the kitchen. She picked up a knife and gun stored there for emergencies. According to Quinton, Shannon then threatened him, prompting him to act quickly. The two got into a physical altercation, which ultimately ended in Shannon's death. Quinton stressed to the investigators that he had only defended himself. Although they were skeptical due to Quinton's lack of defensive wounds, they continued to listen to his account. Quinton Neal panicked when he realized he had done something irreversible. He hid evidence of the crime in a large suitcase in the basement of his house, where the incident occurred. Later, he led the police to a storage unit 6 miles from his residence, where the suitcase was stored. Inside, detectives found the body of Shannon, Quinton's girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time. Shannon's wrists and ankles were bound with duct tape, contradicting Quinton's claim of self-defense. Forensic experts determined that Shannon died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had additional knife wounds on her body. On April 18, 2018, detectives informed Shannon's parents of the devastating discovery. Quinton was subsequently indicted for the murder of Shannon and her unborn child. The evidence gathered, including their correspondence on the day of the incident, was sufficient to secure a guilty verdict. According to the evidence, Shannon had visited Quinton's house to discuss her pregnancy, but an argument ensued, and she never left the house alive. The trial of Quinton Neal was initially set to begin in the spring of 2019, but it was delayed by 3 months due to anonymous letters received by attorneys and court officials just days before the start date. These letters claimed that someone other than Quinton Neal was responsible for Shannon's death. However, when the author of the letters was identified as one of Quinton's friends, who had written them in an attempt to confuse the investigation and help Quinton, the judge ruled that the letters were not relevant. Quinton Neal was facing the possibility of capital punishment and denied the charges against him, claiming he had acted in self-defense. 15 months had passed since Shannon's death, and her family was eager for justice. Before her death, Shannon had been working to support victims of domestic violence and help women and children. Her family had planned to build a shelter home, a dream that was put on hold when Shannon became a victim herself. On July 15, 2019, Quentin Neal accepted a plea deal with investigators, admitting his guilt in the murder of Shannon and her child. As part of the agreement, prosecutors dropped their pursuit of the death penalty. 2 days later, on July 17, 2019, Neal was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences by the Milwaukee County Circuit Court. He will not be eligible for parole, ensuring he will spend the remainder of his life in prison. During his sentencing, Neal remained silent, never explaining his motivations for the crime. Shannon's family expressed relief that justice had been served. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner, and they became inseparable after he invited her to prom. While their love was palpable, their significant age difference raised concerns. Despite this, their parents did not intervene in their relationship. As time passed, the Roden and Wagner families grew close, often spending weekends and attending parties together. The young couple's love was carefree and passionate. When Hannah turned 15, she revealed her pregnancy, which thrilled Jake. He expected his family to be delighted with the news, as they valued tradition and family lineage. The Wagners saw the baby as a way to continue their family name, which was passed down through generations. In contrast, the Rodens had a more modest approach to family, but still prioritized their children. Hannah's parents, Christopher and Dana, remained devoted to their 3 kids despite their divorce. The Roden family's income was modest, unlike the Wagners. To celebrate Sophie's birthday, a grand party was organized shortly after. Jake proposed that Hannah move in with him and his family, claiming it would make life easier for both of them. However, Hannah refused, having come to realize that Jake was trying to control her and limit her independence. This was partly due to Jake's increasing aggression and suspicious behavior, which had already led to physical altercations on several occasions. Hannah's rejection sparked tension between the Wagners, with each of Sophie's parents determined to gain full custody of Sophie. Driven by their own interests, the families began to advocate for their own rights. Jake's anger towards Hannah peaked when she refused to sign a document granting him and his brother full custody. He even threatened her, accusing her of hiding secrets. The situation escalated when Hannah announced her second pregnancy. Although she claimed the child was fathered by another man, Jake was skeptical. In December 2015, he hacked into Hannah's social media accounts to uncover evidence of infidelity, but found none. Instead, he discovered her communication with Georgia Fort's former mother-in-law, which sparked his interest. A court case was soon to follow as a result. During a court hearing to decide where their granddaughter Sophie would live, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III got into a serious argument. This dispute marked the beginning of the end for the relationship between the 2 families. The Wagner family soon became convinced that Hannah, Sophie's mother, was an obstacle and that they needed to eliminate her and the entire Roden family, who could potentially gain custody of Sophie. This disturbing idea evolved into a sinister plan by Christmas 2016. While many people were celebrating the festive season with love and kindness, the Wagners held a chilling family vote to decide whether to carry out their plan. Every family member agreed to go ahead, and they began assigning roles and making preparations. Over the next 5 months, they secretly observed the Roden homes, studying their daily routines, work schedules, and surveillance cameras. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III visited Christopher Roden under the guise of offering him a job to improve his finances. This was just a ruse to get into the house. The next evening, around 8 p.m., Christopher Roden Sr. answered the door, unaware of the danger lurking. Earlier that day, Bobby Jo Manley, Dana Roden's sister, had stopped by Christopher's trailer to care for the family's animals, as she did daily since he had offered her a job. However, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual at that time of day. Alarmed, she called emergency services, reporting what she saw and requesting help at 477 Union Hill Road. Panicked, Bobby rushed to the neighboring homes of relatives, loudly knocking on their doors. At one of the homes, she found a 3-year-old boy, Clarence's son, who didn't respond to her questions about his parents' whereabouts, only pointing towards the bed. Following the incident, the surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear, and the police advised the Roden relatives to take precautions and warned all Pike residents to stay indoors at night. After a brutal mass murder shocked the state, the public demanded a swift and transparent investigation, urging authorities to catch the perpetrators as soon as possible. In response, businessman Jeff Ruby offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. However, he later withdrew the offer. An investigative task force of at least 100 individuals was formed to work on the case. Following the funerals, investigators took possession of the slain family's 3 trailers and several vehicles, transporting them to a secure facility to preserve evidence and protect the victims' belongings. The plan was to return the family's cars and farming equipment to their relatives after the investigation. Forensic experts joined the inquiry, meticulously examining the trailers, but no suspect DNA was found. Although cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, they had been disabled, leaving no useful footage. The perpetrators had clearly planned every detail carefully. Just when it seemed like there were no significant leads, detectives made a breakthrough discovery. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes. In one location, police found around 200 cannabis plants, leading them to suspect the drugs were being grown for sale, not personal use. This raised questions about potential involvement with Mexican drug traffickers, but the amount of cannabis found was too small to imply involvement with an entire cartel. A relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking in January 2017, but this was considered a coincidence. Leonard Manley, the father of Dana Roden, denied his daughter's involvement in the cannabis operation, saying that they were trying to drag Dana through the mud, and he didn't like it. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale operation. The theory that a family feud over illegally obtained money was behind the murders was also disproven. At the Rodens' property, authorities discovered not only banned substances, but also specialized equipment used for breeding fighting chickens and cages containing animals trained for combat. Although these findings initially led investigators to suspect illegal animal fights might be connected to the homicide, it soon became apparent that this was not the case. Despite months of investigation, the true motive behind the crime remained a mystery. By April 13, 2017, local authorities officially announced that they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. However, prosecutor Rob Young insisted that the investigation was still active, implying that they had some promising leads that they were not yet ready to reveal. As the second anniversary of the mass crime approached, the case received little attention from the local media, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attended the memorial service, leading the community to suspect that the investigation had stalled. On May 12, 2017, a surprising turn of events occurred when a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, just 10 miles from the scene of the crime. Initially, they were looking for suspects, but it was later revealed that their true intention was to gather evidence. Additionally, detectives searched a house in Adams County that had previously belonged to Jake Wagner, although he had already sold it by that time. Approximately a month later, on June 20, 2017, the focus of the investigation officially shifted towards the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims, were under scrutiny. The Wagners had moved to Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area, claiming to have loved the Roden family and stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior, it wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving Jake had hacked into Hannah's account during the examination of the Wagner family's devices. Search queries related to guardianship were discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased sneakers for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime. The tread pattern of one of these matched that found in one of the trailers. Officers believed Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executive. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons, who were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were arrested and charged with perjury and obstructing justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a document related to Sophie's guardianship. She struck a plea deal to avoid imprisonment. The charges against Frida Wagner were later dropped in June 2019. The other Wagners refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any involvement in the Rodens' deaths, expressing sorrow and wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. However, in April 2021, 5 years after the incident, Jake Wagner decided to make a deal with the prosecution. Under the agreement, he would provide details of the crime in exchange for life sentences for all family members instead of the death penalty. Jake Wagner Jr. admitted to killing 5 people and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges, including aggravated murder, burglary, conspiracy, and other crimes. To ensure his daughter Hannah wouldn't be taken away, he thought killing her mother was the only solution. He believed that if he didn't also kill the Rodens, they would seek revenge and fight for custody of Hannah. Angela, who had been involved in the conspiracy, pleaded guilty to several charges on September 10th, including conspiracy, robbery, and evidence tampering. In exchange for her cooperation, the charge of murder was dropped. She received a 30-year prison sentence. George Wagner IV went on trial on August 28, 2022. Despite denying any involvement in the crimes, claiming he was unaware of what was happening, the prosecution presented evidence of his role in planning, executing, and covering up the crimes. He was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. George Wagner III's trial is set for February 2024. Despite his family members being convicted, he still maintains his innocence, but likely faces the same fate as his son. The once peaceful relationship between the Wagners and Rodens ended in tragedy, driven by a collective and incomprehensible madness. The consequences of their actions left 3 children without parents. As Sophie grows up, she will one day realize what happened, and it's hard to imagine how she will cope with that knowledge. The Wagners' bitter custody battle had a devastating impact on her, denying her the love and support of her parents, relatives, and a stable upbringing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Ann Wood. Sarah Ann Wood was born on March 4, 1981 in New York. Raised in a devout family, her father served as a pastor in a small town in the state's middle. From a young age, Sarah, along with her older sister and brother, attended services at her father's church and Sunday school. Dancing was her passion, poetry brought her joy, and she was an enthusiastic member of her school's cheerleading team. Sarah loved nothing more than riding her bike, often using it to get to her father's church, less than a mile from home, for services, Sunday school, or to lend her father a hand. On August 18, 1993, When Sarah was 12, she rode her bike to church for Sunday school, following her usual routine. With her father staying home, the classes were conducted by other church members. Her parents expected her to return immediately after the classes, but as time passed and she failed to appear, they grew increasingly anxious. After waiting a little longer, they headed to the church, thinking Sarah might have lingered behind with friends, but she was nowhere to be found. The Sunday school teachers reported that she had departed on her bike soon after classes, taking with her a few books, some colorful folders, and a small display board. Her parents' concern escalated because the ride home from church should have taken only a few minutes, and it was unlikely Sarah would have gone elsewhere with all those items. Moreover, she always sought permission before deviating from her routine. Her parents retraced the route to the church, inquiring with neighbors if anyone had seen their daughter, leveraging the small town's familiarity and Sarah's father's church connections. Dozens of people quickly joined the search, and they soon found a witness who had seen Sarah riding towards her house around 2:30 p.m., just a few hundred yards from her home. This sighting only intensified her parents' anxiety, convinced that something had indeed happened to Sarah, prompting them to contact the police. The local police department swiftly launched a search operation, deploying dozens of officers to scour the area. The sheriff also requested assistance from the fire department, and they joined forces to aid in the search. News of Sarah's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the community, prompting dozens of volunteers to join the effort. Within the first few hours, several hundred people were involved in the search. The police concentrated on the route from the church to Sarah's home, meticulously searching the fields and woods on both sides of the road. Their efforts soon yielded a disturbing discovery. Just a few yards into the woods, they found Sarah's bike leaning against a tree. The police centered their focus on that area and quickly uncovered the items Sarah had brought from Sunday school, hidden beneath a nearby bush. These findings led investigators to a grim inference. It was likely that Sarah had been abducted. They theorized that an unknown assailant might have dragged her from the road into the woods, left her belongings behind, and then taken her away in a vehicle. The police department launched an all-out search effort, pouring all its resources into finding Sarah. Meanwhile, her restless relatives took matters into their own hands, printing flyers with details of her disappearance and distributing them not only in their hometown, but also in surrounding cities, with the help of dozens of volunteers. Despite their collective efforts, the first day's search yielded nothing. Police and volunteers scoured the area within a several-mile radius of the road until nightfall, but no new leads emerged. The search resumed the next morning, with even more people joining the effort. The state police also joined the investigation, focusing on identifying a potential suspect. Investigators questioned every resident in town, hoping someone might have spotted a suspicious stranger or vehicle linked to Sarah's disappearance. Sarah's parents set up an improvised headquarters, manned by dozens of volunteers, who printed and distributed flyers, scouring for witnesses or leads that could bring them closer to finding Sarah. As local media picked up the story, news of her disappearance spread nationwide within days. The police received over 1,000 tips, meticulously investigating each one, but repeatedly hit dead ends. Concerned residents helped the parents raise a substantial $150,000 reward for any information about Sarah's whereabouts. But unfortunately, this too yielded nothing. The active phase of the search continued for about a week, before the police concluded they were unlikely to find valuable leads in the area. They shifted their focus to finding a potential suspect, scrutinizing local residents and convicted criminals from neighboring towns, but to no avail. Sarah's disappearance was featured on 2 popular national television shows, triggering a new wave of tips. Her parents made regular appeals to the public through the media, pleading for any information about their daughter's whereabouts, but her fate remained a mystery. This continued for nearly 6 months until a surprising breakthrough occurred. On the morning of January 7, 1994, 12-year-old Rebecca left her home in a small Massachusetts town and set out on her walk to school. As she strolled down a deserted street, she noticed a man walking alongside her. He attempted to speak, but Rebecca couldn't hear him due to her headphones. When she removed them, the man brandished a gun and warned her that if she obeyed his every command, he wouldn't harm her. He grasped her jacket, and they continued walking in the same direction. Rebecca was terrified to scream or attempt to flee, aware that even if she complied, the man might still kill her. As they walked, she quickly devised a plan. Feigning an asthma attack, she struggled to breathe and sat down on the ground. The man released her jacket, instead gripping the edge of her backpack as she continued to act as if she were suffocating. Seizing the moment, Rebecca slipped out of the backpack straps and sprinted away from her kidnapper. A few hundred yards away, she spotted several adults and rushed towards them, exclaiming that someone had just attempted to abduct her. Meanwhile, the kidnapper sped away in his car, taking Rebecca's backpack with him. One of the witnesses took it upon himself to tail the kidnapper in his own vehicle. After a few minutes, the witness pulled over at the nearest gas station and alerted the police. The witness was able to provide a partial license plate number and the car's model, while Rebecca gave a detailed description of the kidnapper's appearance. The police promptly launched a search for the vehicle, scouring databases for matching cars. They also sent out alerts to neighboring towns, and their efforts were rewarded that very evening. A patrol officer driving through a nearby small town spotted a vehicle matching the description. He pulled over and knocked on the door of the house where it was parked. Inside, he found several people, and upon inquiring about the pickup truck, the owner explained that he hadn't driven it in a while due to his loss of sight. He revealed that his neighbor, 43-year-old Louis Lint, frequently borrowed the truck. Louis, a handyman, assisted his blind neighbor with various household tasks in exchange for using the pickup truck. According to Louis, he last drove the truck the previous day and hadn't used it since. Nonetheless, the officer asked him to come to the station for questioning, and Louis complied. Despite his earlier denial, Louis continued to insist that he hadn't used the pickup that day and had no involvement in the attempted abduction. He claimed to be a devout Christian who spent most of his free time at church and would never engage in such an act. While Louis was at the station, the police took his photograph and presented it to Rebecca and other witnesses in a photo lineup alongside pictures of other men. Unanimously, they identified Louis as the kidnapper. Investigators promptly obtained a warrant to search Louis's house and the vehicles, including the pickup truck owned by his neighbor. Their search yielded a disturbing discovery: a small bag containing duct tape, a knife, children's sunglasses, and candy in Louis's van, which was parked near their house. Additionally, the police found a gun and Rebecca's backpack inside the house. Investigators uncovered a shocking discovery: a large, secret room dug out beneath the house, still under construction. With this substantial evidence, the police arrested Louis for the attempted abduction. Initially, he maintained his innocence, but soon decided to confess to everything. He admitted to traveling to Rebecca's town in search of a victim, bringing along his kidnapping bag that he always kept in his car. Louis then explained the purpose of the secret room he was digging under his house, and his story left even the police stunned. He revealed that he planned to convert it into a fully equipped bunker where he intended to hold kidnapped victims captive. Louis confessed to aiming to abduct 11 girls between the ages of 12 and 17 to satisfy his horrific fantasies. He added that until the room was completed, he didn't plan to keep his victims there for long, intending to kill them within a few days. In Louis's house, the police also found a list of several names. Upon identifying these individuals, they realized they were all children living in close proximity to Louis's home. Following his confession, Louis was placed in jail awaiting trial for attempted abduction. Investigators continued to visit him to gather additional information, and during one of these visits, he unexpectedly confessed to another crime. Lewis revealed that 4 years prior, in October 1990, he was working as a janitor at a movie theater in the same town where he later attempted to kidnap Rebecca. On the evening of October 22nd, he left work and spotted 12-year-old James Bernardo riding his bike near the parking lot. Lewis instantly decided to abduct him, intending to assault him. Lewis offered James $5 to help set up chairs in the movie theater, and the boy agreed. Lewis led him to the empty theater where he bound him. He then drove his van closer to the entrance, dragged the boy and his bike inside, and took him to his home. He left the boy there and drove to a nearby lake to dispose of the bike by throwing it into the water. Lewis returned home and attempted to assault the boy, but was unsuccessful. Frustrated, he decided to dispose of the victim. He dragged him into his van and drove to a neighboring state, where he murdered the boy and left the body in the forest. A hunter soon discovered the body and reported it to the police. However, despite their efforts, detectives were unable to identify the culprit over the course of several years. Now, upon comparing Lewis's statement with the case materials, investigators discovered that he had provided an astonishing number of facts and details about the crime that perfectly mirrored reality. Following Lewis's confession, news of his case spread like wildfire throughout the country. Within just a few days, police realized they were dealing with a man who not only had attempted to abduct a girl and was building a secret bunker for other victims, but had also confessed to a murder that no one had suspected him of. New York investigators searching for Sarah Wood soon caught wind of Lewis's case. They delved into the details of Rebecca's attempted abduction and requested more information about Lewis himself. Interestingly, profilers had previously created a profile of Sarah's potential abductor, and Lewis seemed to fit it remarkably well. The investigators decided to pay him a visit and headed to the prison. During the interrogation, he revealed that frequent visits to the neighboring state were motivated by close family ties. Lewis also admitted that he would often drive through small towns in search of victims, and on August 18, 1993, he spotted Sarah walking along the road with her bike. According to his statement, he pulled up beside her, got out of the car, and forced her into the van at gunpoint. He then tied her up, dragged her belongings and bike into the nearby woods to conceal them, and drove her hundreds of miles to the mountains. In a remote area by a large lake, he assaulted and killed her, eventually burying her body in a hole. The police launched an extensive search effort around the lake, mobilizing hundreds of volunteers, park rangers, and the military. However, the vast size of the lake posed a significant challenge, making it nearly impossible to cover the entire area, even with such a large search team. Furthermore, with months having passed since the burial, the location could have become overgrown with vegetation. After weeks of searching, they were unable to find either the body or any evidence. Detailed testimony with precise details of the abduction was sufficient to charge Lewis with the murders of both Sarah and 12-year-old James. In January 1995, Lewis was sentenced to 17 to 20 years in prison for the attempted abduction of Rebecca. The following June, the trial for James's murder began, and Lewis pleaded guilty before the judge. He confided in his lawyer that he wanted to confess to Sarah's murder immediately, but when he entered the courtroom and saw her parents, he abruptly changed his mind. However, just 9 days later, when he was brought into an empty courtroom, he finally admitted his guilt. Despite this, he persisted in refusing to disclose the burial site, ignoring the desperate pleas from Sarah's parents. The prosecution offered Lewis a deal in exchange for information about Sarah's whereabouts. In return, they promised to serve his sentence in a state prison instead of a federal prison, as Lewis had requested. He agreed and began collaborating with investigators. Lewis identified a specific area near the lake and even sketched a rough map. Although the police wanted to take him along on the search, his lawyer cautioned against it. Undeterred, the police organized extensive searches in this area, braving the snow and freezing temperatures, with the help of hundreds of volunteers and heavy equipment. Despite their efforts, they were still unable to find Sarah. Several months later, with autumn's arrival, the police launched another attempt, but it ultimately proved unsuccessful. Throughout this period, detectives endeavored to extract more specific information from Lewis, but he persistently refused to divulge the exact location or assist the police in their search. Eventually, the prosecution opted to revoke the deal, and on April 11, 1997, Lewis was sentenced to 25 years in prison, the maximum sentence the judge could impose without the discovery of the body. The judge added that if such evidence were available, he would have certainly handed down a death sentence. During the trial, Lewis's lawyer attempted to mitigate the punishment in all three cases without disputing his client's guilt. He argued that Lewis suffered from an unidentified mental disorder, citing claims of hearing voices in his head and alleged protection by aliens. However, experts found no evidence of any mental disease and concluded that Lewis was likely feigning these symptoms to avoid severe punishment. After the verdict, detectives persisted in visiting Lewis in prison, hoping to coax him into revealing Sarah's burial site. His behavior was erratic, and he provided contradictory information, naming different locations. On one occasion, he claimed he wasn't ready to disclose the location because he had buried Sarah alongside another victim, and he didn't want anyone to uncover the identity of this other person. Despite the emotional pleas of Sarah's parents, who also visited Lewis in prison, he remained resolute in his silence. The detectives were also exploring Lewis's potential involvement in other unsolved cases. Having confessed to the abductions of Sarah and James, the police had little doubt that he had additional victims. Almost immediately after his arrest, they uncovered another attempted abduction he had made several years prior. Lewis had tried to grab a girl off the street, but her father intervened, and they reported the incident to the police, although detectives couldn't identify the perpetrator until Lewis's photo appeared in the news. Lewis was also suspected of being involved in 4 unsolved disappearances between 1985 and 1992, and investigators concluded that he had the capability to commit these crimes, but no evidence was found, and Lewis refused to confess. Despite this, his story didn't end there. Detectives continued to visit him after his sentencing, hoping he would reveal Sarah's whereabouts or confess to other crimes. However, it wasn't until 2013 that Lewis suddenly had a change of heart and confessed to another murder. He admitted to being responsible for one of the crimes he was suspected of. According to Lewis, on November 6, 1992, he abducted a 16-year-old teenager with developmental disabilities who was riding a bike to his grandmother's house. He claimed to have forced the boy into his van, then killed him and dumped his body in a lake. Investigators confirmed his involvement based on his detailed description of the events, although official charges in the case have yet to be filed against him to this day. Currently, Lewis is 73 years old and remains incarcerated for 2 murders and an attempted abduction. Sarah's parents hold on to the hope that they will eventually persuade him to reveal the location of her burial site, or that he will divulge this secret before his death. In memory of Sarah, her relatives also organize an annual bike ride. Initially attended by just a few people, the event has grown steadily, with several thousand participants now regularly taking part. This event also helps raise significant funds to support efforts to locate missing children. The police are determined to find Sarah's burial site and are not giving up, even if Lewis is not willing to help them. They will keep searching the areas he has pointed out until they locate her body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney. Marina Menegazzo, 21, and Maria Jose Coney, 22, embarked on a highly anticipated trip in 2016. Little did they know that this journey would turn into one of the most high-profile investigations in Latin America over the past decade. At the time, Maria Jose Coney was studying economics at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina Manazo was pursuing a degree in speech therapy at Aconcagua University. Both girls volunteered at an organization that supported people living on the streets. Those who knew them described the girls as cheerful and close to their families. The two friends, along with two others, set off on a journey on January 10th. After splitting up with their companions, Marina and Maria Jose continued on their own. Their route could be tracked through Maria Jose's Instagram posts. On January 13th, they were in Cusco, the former capital of the Inca Empire in Peru. The next day, an image was posted, also taken in Cusco. Another image was published on January 15th, showing the girls on a railway bridge near the Machu Picchu hydroelectric power plant. The ancient Inca city of Machu Picchu, known as the City Above the Clouds, is one of Peru's most famous attractions and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Based on their Instagram activity, it appears the girls spent several days in the area. On January 18th, Maria shared 2 more photos from her current location. The next day, January 19th, she bid farewell to Cusco by posting an image. By January 23rd, the girls had already arrived in Manta, Ecuador, where Maria posted a photo taken on Monita Beach. Over the next 10 days, they traveled along Ecuador's coast and then headed inland. On February 4th, Maria posted a photo from San Antonio, followed by one from Banos on February 6th. On February 10th, Maria shared a photo featuring all 4 girls, marking the end of their journey that began on January 10th. This farewell post came as 2 girls from the group prepared to return home to Argentina. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Manazo still had around 10 days of vacation left, so they decided to take their time and revisit Montanita, where their Ecuadorian adventure had first begun. On February 22nd, Maria uploaded a photo of herself with Marina to her Instagram account, which was her last post. That same day, the girls informed their families in Argentina that they would be returning home soon. They outlined their travel plans, which involved taking a bus from Ecuador to Lima, Peru, where they would spend the night at a friend's house. From there, they would fly to Santiago, Chile on February 25th, and then take a bus to their hometown of Mendoza, Argentina. The girls also warned their relatives that they would have limited phone signal for a couple of days, making it difficult to contact them. However, as the days passed, their relatives were unable to reach them, and there was no activity on their social media accounts. This led to growing concern among their relatives. Marina's sister was the first to draw attention to this case on social media, posting a photo of 2 girls with a plea for help. The caption read, "My sister and her friend vanished on Monday 22nd in Montita, Ecuador. Please share this information." The families of the missing girls wanted to know if they had left the country and boarded their flight, but the airline refused to provide any information, stating they would only disclose this after receiving a court order. Furthermore, the friends with whom the girls had planned to spend the night before their departure reported that they never showed up. As a result, Marina and Maria's relatives contacted the emergency services in Ecuador to report the disappearance, and also reached out to the Argentine consulate for assistance. On February 27th, the consulate stepped in to help with the case. Argentina's authorities had sent fingerprints of both girls to Ecuador for a specific reason. Just a few days earlier, on February 25th, the body of an unknown woman was discovered in Montanita and taken to Gil. By comparing the fingerprints provided by the Argentine police with those of the unidentified body, it was determined that the body was that of Maria Jose Coney. On Saturday, February 27th, the police examined the area where Maria's body was found and discovered the body of Marina Manazo just 43 yards away. Both bodies were wrapped in plastic bags and bound with duct tape. According to the Ecuadorian police, Marina's body was initially hidden from view by the perpetrator, who attempted to conceal it by placing an object on top of it. The autopsy revealed that Maria Jose died from blunt force trauma to the head, and she had genital injuries, a broken femur, and a broken toe. Additionally, marks on her wrists suggested that she was tied up. Marina Manazzo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck, and she also had marks on her wrists, indicating that she too was tied up. The reports concluded that the girls died on February 23rd. The toxicological analysis showed that their blood contained a large amount of a psychiatric medication, suggesting that they did not take the drug voluntarily and may not have even known they had consumed it. This implies that someone may have added the drug to their food or drinks. Only 24 hours after the second body was discovered, a major breakthrough in the case sparked a range of reactions from the girls' families, the president, and Ecuador's interior minister. The police had apprehended 33-year-old Alberto Segundo Mina Ponce and 39-year-old Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, who confessed to the crimes and recounted the events in detail. Bloodstains were found at Mina Ponce's residence, and Marina's mobile phone, backpack, and other belongings were discovered nearby. What was particularly striking, apart from the swift arrest, was the defendant's immediate confession. This development resonated with those following the case. According to their account, the men described exactly what had happened. Ecuador's Interior Minister, José Serrano, stated that the girls had left the hotel where they were staying on February 22nd at 2 p.m. after being robbed of all their money. They had planned to hitchhike to Lima, but this version was disputed by the hotel owner, who denied that anyone had stolen from the girls. The families of Maria and Marina also questioned this story, as the girls had credit cards with no activity recorded on them. It is possible that someone stole the cash and credit cards from the girls, but they still had access to their account funds, which they could have used to pay for things online, such as booking a trip. However, they did not do so. According to Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, the girls visited a bar and asked the owner for a couple of glasses of water because they were thirsty and had no money. The bar owner confirmed this, stating that she gave them water because they were penniless. Whether someone actually stole all of Maria and Marina's money remains unclear. The minister elaborated on the events, referencing the confessions of the suspects. According to Ponce, around 8 p.m. on that day, Rodriguez told him about 2 Argentine girls he had met at a bar. Ponce and Rodriguez approached the girls, Marina and Maria, and struck up a conversation. The girls claimed they were hitchhiking to Lima because they couldn't afford bus fare. However, this account raises several questions, as the girls had already purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago, Chile, and were due to depart on February 25th. Local police found witnesses who corroborated this version of events. The girls needed a place to stay for the night, but they lacked the money for a hotel or hostel. Ponce offered to let them spend the night at his house, and they accepted. A taxi driver confirmed that he had driven Marina, Maria, and Ponce to the house. According to the Ecuadorian authorities, Ponce then returned to the bar with Rodriguez, leaving Marina and Maria alone in the house. The heavily intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Maria and Marina were not there. The police investigation revealed that the girls had gone to a nearby store to buy soda, which was confirmed by the store cashier. According to Ponce's testimony, when the girls returned to the house, Ponce stayed in a room with Maria Coney, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Manago. Ponce wanted to persuade Maria to have intimate relations with him, but she resisted and tried to leave the house. Ponce then grabbed a stick and hit Maria on the head, causing her to die instantly. At the same moment, he heard a scream coming from the other room. When he entered the room, he saw that Rodriguez had killed Marina. Rodriguez immediately left the house afterwards. Ponce admitted that he then started thinking about how to dispose of the bodies. He attempted to remove all traces of evidence from the house and wrapped the bodies in plastic bags using duct tape. In the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported the bodies to a deserted area near the ocean shore, approximately 440 yards from his home. The authorities discovered several inconsistencies in the case. Despite the marks on the girls' wrists, there was no explanation. Furthermore, the toxicological analysis revealed that both girls had traces of a potent drug in their blood. The girls' families suspected a possible link to human trafficking and believed that the Ecuadorian authorities were involved in a cover-up. The families had several reasons to doubt the official story. Firstly, the girls had run out of money, yet they hadn't used their credit cards. Secondly, they were under the influence of drugs. Notably, the only witnesses who saw Maria and Marina that day were the ones who corroborated the authorities' version of events. It seemed strange that the bodies were found 2 days apart, only 43 yards from each other, in a town with just 5,000 residents. Additionally, it was peculiar that Maria and Marina sought help from Ponce and Rodriguez, given that there were many Argentine tourists in Monita, and it would have been more logical for the girls to approach someone from their own country for assistance. The brother of one of the victims reported seeing used syringes on the floor when the Ecuadorian police took him to the crime scene, but these syringes later vanished, and the experts who examined the area claimed they never existed. The family believes that the two accused men were just a diversion from a larger issue, possibly human trafficking. A second autopsy and new toxicology tests were scheduled by the authorities. It was also discovered that both defendants repeatedly altered their accounts of what happened. In one version, Mina Ponce denied involvement in the crime, stating that the perpetrator was a Venezuelan illegal substance dealer known as El Chamo, who lived in the area. The police arrested this man, but he claimed to have no connection to the incident and was willing to take a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample. Several DNA samples were recovered at the crime scene, including those from Mina Ponce and the two deceased girls. Additionally, there were multiple unidentified DNA samples that did not match Rodriguez, the alleged accomplice, nor El Chamo, who was cleared as a suspect following thorough DNA testing. The second autopsy, performed by Argentine experts, revealed that both girls were in a vulnerable state and unable to defend themselves prior to their deaths, indicating they were coerced into sexual activity. The autopsy also showed that Maria Jose had bruises and scratches exclusively on one side of her body, suggesting she may have been thrown from a moving vehicle. Furthermore, a new toxicology report confirmed that both girls had been drugged with a potent substance used in psychiatric treatment, which can suppress a person's will. Next, a reaction swept across Latin America. Sadly, a common phenomenon occurred. People placed the blame for their deaths on the girls themselves. Not only did ordinary internet users do this, but so did prominent public figures. One notable example is Maria Cristina Rivera, the Deputy Minister of Tourism for Ecuador. During the same period when news of Maria and Marina's deaths was circulating, Berlin hosted a tourism fair. Rivera gave an interview to a German news agency, but stating that the way the girls traveled made it inevitable that something bad would happen to them. She also commented that she had never visited Monita, as it didn't align with her social status. This was a disturbing case of victim blaming at the state level. Following Rivera's interview, the Ecuadorian government issued an apology to the families of Maria and Marina and terminated the woman's employment. The Argentine psychiatrist, Hugo Martin, faced intense criticism for his remarks, in which he referred to the girls as favorable victims and suggested that they somehow provoked others into committing crimes. Martin later claimed that his words had been misinterpreted, stating that he never intended to imply that criminals were not responsible for their actions. The trial, which began on August 8, 2016, was plagued by setbacks, including 3 changes in prosecutors, significantly delaying the process. Despite these challenges, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of evidence, including over 200 pieces of physical evidence from the crime scene and witness statements. The police had discovered some of the girls' personal belongings, biological fluids, and phones at the crime scene and in the adjacent house. Throughout the trial, Ponce maintained his innocence, claiming that his initial confession was made under police pressure. This assertion only fueled the suspicion of the girls' families, who believed that the Ecuadorian authorities were concealing information. Rodriguez, meanwhile, altered his testimony, implicating Colombian drug dealers in the girls' deaths. In the first week of the trial, the prosecutor revealed that additional individuals may have been involved, as the police had found 3 more male DNA samples at the scene, in addition to those of Rodriguez and Ponce. Ultimately, the court handed down the maximum sentence under Ecuadorian law, sentencing both Alberto Ponce and Eduardo Rodriguez to 40 years in prison. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities arrested José Luis Pérez Castro, a 34-year-old man, after finding his DNA at the crime scene. According to his defense, Castro had lived in the house a few weeks prior to the incident, and his blood was found on the wall due to a dental infection. The lawyers also claimed that Castro's DNA was found on the girls' bodies because he had touched furniture or objects that the police had also touched. However, Castro's defense began to fall apart when a dentist testified. It emerged that Castro had visited the dentist, but only 2 weeks after the discovery of Marina and Maria's bodies. Castro asked the dentist for a note confirming his dental infection, but the dentist refused, finding no health issues during the examination. The dentist ultimately kicked Castro out. José Luis Castro, like Alberto Ponce and Eduardo Rodriguez, was sentenced to 40 years in prison, despite maintaining his innocence until the end. The girls' families questioned the official account provided by the Ecuadorian authorities, even though the families had ensured that Argentine police officers were involved in the investigation. The Ecuadorian authorities' version of events has remained unchanged, and the search for other individuals whose DNA samples were found at the house is still ongoing to this day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nathan Pate. On the night of December 1, 2010, Staff Sergeant Nathan Pate was in quite a rush. He was late for duty at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. By strange coincidence, his alarm clock, which never failed to go off, didn't ring that day. Nathan woke up at 11 p.m. and woke up his wife, Michelle. He hurriedly took a shower, said goodbye to his family, then went to the garage. He was about to put on his uniform and start the car when suddenly loud shots rang out from behind him. Pate's children and wife came running at the sound. There, standing on the doorstep, was Nathan, bleeding and staggering from side to side. It was obvious he was about to fall. Michelle felt terrified and rushed toward her husband to help him up, but wasn't in time. The father of the family collapsed onto the floor. Around 11:30 p.m., 911 received a call. "My husband has been shot. He's bleeding. Help him." Mrs. Pate screamed into the phone. The dispatcher quickly explained how to administer first aid. Michelle tried giving artificial respiration to her spouse, but it didn't bring any relief. When rescuers arrived, they took him to the nearest hospital, where doctors did everything possible to save him. However, efforts weren't enough. They couldn't bring the young man back to life. The neck wound proved fatal for 28-year-old Nathan Pate. Upon being informed of her husband's death, Michelle's world shattered into before and after. An exemplary family man and valiant serviceman had been murdered right on his doorstep in Las Vegas. His death caused public outrage. Relatives, acquaintances, and concerned citizens demanded answers from the police. Who could commit such lawlessness? What were their motives? Was justice served? Nathan Joseph Villagomez Payet was born on February 12, 1982, in the village of Tamuning on Guam. Guam, a small island in the Pacific Ocean, is known for its paradisiacal beauty and historical past. Consequently, it is especially popular among tourists. Nathan was born in this amazing region and was fortunate to have a large and loving family. He had 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and 1 sister, Carmela. The children were very friendly and helped their parents in everything. Nathan himself stood out from the others as he never caused trouble. He was a caring child at home and a diligent student at school. Nathan was very sociable, so he easily made friends. Brother Eric recalled that there was perhaps no one who did not want to communicate with him. Living near the ocean fostered Nathan's love for swimming from childhood, which later evolved into a passion for surfing. He spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sun and life. Nathan met his future wife during his studies at South High School, located in the neighboring town of Santa Rita. Michelle Anant Chuck was attracted to him at first sight. Young people began spending time together daily, and their affection for each other only grew stronger. They never parted. Together they studied at school, prepared for classes, and helped with household chores. Strong teenage friendship soon transformed into tender love. When Michelle was 16 years old, her family faced a terrible grief as her mother passed away. Consequently, Michelle spent all her free time helping her sister Melissa, the eldest of the Chuck family, who took on the role of mother and mistress of the house. Nathan supported her in everything she did and helped look after the younger children. In 2000, after graduation, Nathan decided to propose to Michelle, who happily accepted his proposal. Given their family's financial constraints preventing them from having a wedding ceremony, the couple received blessings from their parents to move in together instead. To earn a living, Nathan got a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. He earned a decent income, and there was enough money. However, like most young people, Nathan and Michelle were ambitious. They envisioned their own home and, soon, their son Dion was born into the Nathan family. Income then became insufficient to meet their expenses, prompting Nathan to consider a job that could offer his family a more secure existence. This aspiration led Nathan to join the Air Force. After graduation, he was assigned to Elmendorf Air Base in Anchorage, Alaska. After some time, the couple's dream came true when they built their own house. It was in this new home that their second child, a daughter named Niara, was born. Nathan saw success in his military career, which helped him fulfill ambitions that he and Michelle had previously been unable to achieve. Finally, 6 years after their engagement, they celebrated with a big wedding. My mom was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first to go out and achieve something, Eric said. In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Military Base in Arizona. He received a promotion to weapons loading team leader for the A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft of one of the Essex squadrons. During this time, he also trained in logistics and material management. Nathan definitely loved his job and performed it with dedication and good intentions. He was truly dedicated to his country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. There, he took on the role of Assistant Junior Officer in charge of the supply section for maintenance of combat aircraft. Alongside his career progressions came family growth. Soon after moving, Nathan and Michelle welcomed 2 more sons, Dron and David. Michelle fell in love with Las Vegas. She believed it was an ideal place to live. To make her happy, Nathan decided they would settle down there permanently. Nathan selected the most suitable house for a large family, spacious and bright. Additionally, the future family home was conveniently located 30 to 40 minutes from the military base. Nathan made the down payment with his savings. The only task left was to manage the family's income and expenses wisely. Perhaps he could save some money temporarily, at least until Mr. Pat's next prospects materialized. Initially, Michelle was thrilled with her husband's surprise and set about organizing daily life in their new house. However, over time, their demands grew, and the family's expenditures exceeded Nathan's earnings. The joy of purchasing a new house began to diminish. It's well known that financial difficulties can strain relationships, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing that the situation needed correction, Nathan enlisted as a volunteer in mid-2009 when the USA was at war with Iraq. His departure lasted 6 months, during which time the family's financial condition improved considerably. Nathan took solace in this improvement. After a short rest at home, Sergeant Pate decided to return to Iraq. While Nathan risked his life abroad, Michelle struggled with anxiety and intrusive thoughts about being alone with 4 children. Accustomed to a certain standard of living, she found it challenging to envision life differently. To distract herself from these worries, Mrs. Pett took a job at a corporate credit card telemarketing firm. Employment brought variety and new acquaintances into her routine and provided Michelle with her own safety net. Michelle didn't rule out starting her own business in the future and actively engaged in self-development by attending a school of aesthetics. Life went on as usual when Nathan was home. When he left, however, Michelle felt bored. The birth of their children, endless travels, and her husband's prolonged service had cooled their relationship significantly. With Nathan away for long periods and Michelle yearning for love and attention, their relationship faced undeniable challenges. She took a lover, who turned out to be her colleague, Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a 31-year-old, good-looking local womanizer. Unfortunately, the man was also devious and dishonest. He had even spent time in 2007 in prison for forgery and attempted theft. Despite his background, Michelle couldn't resist Sweet Rudy, as they jokingly called him behind his back. By the end of 2009, Nathan returned home. The distance and the ordeal appeared to have strengthened their family relationship. However, this wasn't actually the case. Michelle was playing a double game. She did not want to lose her husband while having an infatuation on the side. She thus tried hard to please Nathan in every way possible. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in her appearance and character. The children, though, had been growing up without a father for a long time, which negatively impacted their education. Determined not to leave his family again for an extended period, Nathan did not suspect that Michelle's striking changes could be linked to infidelity. His own pure and faithful nature blinded him to this possibility. In Las Vegas, Nathan found a good way to earn more money, double pay by working night shifts and taking up private teaching. He developed training programs for simplified baseball catering to young children. Michelle's pretense didn't hold up for long. Once their standard of living began to fall, her attitude changed entirely and their problems escalated. By Thanksgiving in 2010, Brother Eric and his wife Veronica visited the young family and immediately sensed tension between them. They had changed beyond recognition. It seemed like all former feelings between Michelle and Nathan had completely vanished. The couple's issues were glaringly obvious. Not just personal, but also financial difficulties were evident from their almost empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1, 2010, there was a peculiar communication between Mrs. Pett and Mr. Rodriguez at precisely 11:12 p.m. Michelle received a text message from Michael stating, "Hope you are feeling better." The man wrote, "Van Dyke's contract for tomorrow is almost finalized." 2 minutes later, he sent another text, "If you're not feeling well, let me. I'll give you a couple of days to rest. Remember, I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just recently woke me up. Right now, he is trying to leave the house, but I think he's going to be late today. I'm sorry the contract is giving you so much trouble." A few months before the tragedy, Michelle had decided that she did not want to be with Nathan anymore. However, she also wasn't planning to leave him because she realized that breaking up would only lead to headaches and empty pockets. She thought, "I don't think he will forgive me and support me after the divorce." Michelle believed that alimony would hardly suffice for a normal life. Additionally, Mrs. Pett was aware of her husband's military insurance policy. In the event of his death, payments totaling approximately $6,500 were due to be made to her. These troubling thoughts plagued Michelle's troubled mind until one day she confided in Michael about them. To her surprise, Michael was intrigued by her thoughts. Consequently, the terrible idea from Nathan's former lover transformed into a devious plan. Mr. Rodriguez knew they couldn't execute this plan alone, as it was too complicated. Hence, he enlisted his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins into their criminal scheme. The 33-year-old mercenary had about 9 convictions, each related to theft or fraud. Corey was a hardened criminal and agreed to assist on the condition of a substantial reward. He estimated his participation at $20,000. After much deliberation, Michelle and Michael agreed to his terms. Subsequently, a couple more individuals joined their group: 23-year-old Jessica Austin, Corey's girlfriend, and her friend Shannon. Jessica's friend Shannon was not particularly intelligent. She earned a living by starring in adult films. Shannon was offered 5% of Corey and Jessica's cut for her assistance in the scheme. This lucrative offer quickly enticed her. The initial plan involved shooting Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe and then carrying his body in the car to leave it in the parking lot of one of the apartment complexes. Jessica needed to gather the essential items for the criminal act: men's gloves, a car cover, and a fragrance. Shannon's role was to provide Michael with an alibi. She had to confirm that Michael was by her side on the day of the murder, December 1st, 2010. On that day, Michelle felt unwell and deviated from her usual routine by coming home at about 5:30 p.m. Typically, Michelle's classes at beauty school ended late, around 10:40 p.m. Mrs. Pett arrived home just 5 minutes before Nathan left for work on that unfortunate day. Michelle found her husband sleeping on the sofa. She woke him and suggested they go upstairs together. He did not object, and that was their last night as a couple. Nathan, late for work, went downstairs while Michelle was corresponding with Michael. To avoid suspicion, they used code words in their communications. Michael and his accomplice were stationed in a black Cadillac SRX parked near the victim's house. The perpetrators wore latex gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Knowing the sergeant's military training could be advantageous for Nathan, Michael opted for a surprise attack. He approached Nathan from behind and shot him 5 times in the back. Afterward, Michael quickly exited the garage, got into his car, and fled the scene. The perpetrators then retreated to a prearranged location where they burned their clothes in a fireplace and disposed of other evidence. Following this, Michael and Shannon went to a hotel to establish an alibi. Meanwhile, Jessica meticulously cleaned the apartment where they had stayed. Emergency services and police officers arrived at the crime scene and were shocked by what had transpired. The neighborhood where the Pett family resided was typically seen as model territory. Detective Todd Williams initially chose to inspect the shooting scene. He found the garage door unlocked. There was a noticeable odor of iron inside the room. Blood was smeared on the walls and in the traces of it were also visible on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform were his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were untouched, a robbery murder was ruled out. After examining the scene, Detective Lori Anderson decided to talk to the victim's wife. Michelle explained what had happened. For some reason, she added that the family was struggling financially. This gave the police some ideas. Maybe Nathan was hiding something from his wife, perhaps a gambling addiction, debts, or an affair on the side. At least that would have cleared up the attack. Besides, all the evidence pointed to Nathan being deliberately set up. The police examined the victim's cell phone. It contained only pictures of his wife and children. This convinced the officers that Mr. Pate was a decent man. The investigation continued. The next step in the search for the perpetrator was to canvass the neighborhood. Statistically speaking, there's always someone who saw or heard something. This was indeed true for Nathan. Some neighbors reported seeing a car parked near the house. The car was driven by a man wearing a brown sweatshirt. After shots were fired, the vehicle immediately drove away. Detectives finally had a lead. Nathan's family was shocked to learn what had happened. They caught the first flight out of Guam, waiting for answers. His mother, Carmelita Payette, cried throughout the journey. The woman couldn't believe her son had died so early in life. When they finally reached Nathan's home, Michelle threw herself into her mother-in-law's arms and then lost consciousness. Nathan's mother sensed something unnatural in her daughter-in-law's reaction. For some reason, it seemed faked. The investigators decided to talk to Mrs. Pate again and asked her about the car witnesses had seen nearby. Unexpectedly, she said her colleague Michael Rodriguez had a similar car. Why Michelle gave out this information remains unclear. Police later determined that Michelle had either inadvertently revealed the truth or that the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Detectives then investigated Michael's identity and found that his criminal record heightened their suspicions. He was brought in for questioning, and he responded calmly. Mr. Rodriguez stated that on the day of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he went shopping at a supermarket. During this outing, he met an interesting woman named Shannon. According to him, they had a lengthy conversation and decided to continue their acquaintance at a hotel room. Michael explained that they arrived at the hotel around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's testimony, the officers contacted Shannon. She did confirm their romantic encounter. However, the detective had a feeling something was amiss. The next logical step was to examine the information found in Michelle's phone. Specialists managed to recover correspondence between Michelle and Michael spanning over a year. Their communication turned out to be very suspect. On the exact day of Nathan's murder, the couple discussed a contract with someone named Van DJK. The conversation resembled code rather than a straightforward business negotiation. It seemed like how they planned the crime. Investigators were nearly certain both individuals were involved, but lacked sufficient evidence to detain them longer, so they decided to release Michael until more details could be clarified. After examining Michelle's cell phone, detectives called her back for questioning. She appeared visibly agitated and seemed to be withholding information. Realizing that officers knew more than she wanted them to know, Michelle eventually disclosed her affair with Michael. A little later, she confessed that several months before her husband's death, she and her lover had plotted to kill Nathan. The motive behind this action was apparently tied to insurance payments. Mrs. Pett justified herself by stating that she had repented and claimed she changed her mind during one stage of preparing for the crime. She felt sorry for her husband and even tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle was counting on her accomplice, not waiting for Nathan or missing him. However, the investigators did not believe in the woman's remorse. Her correspondence eloquently testified otherwise. Additionally, she sent Michael a cute smiley face right after she learned of her husband's death. After a while, Shannon came to the police station to confess. The woman must have realized her predicament. Nonetheless, her involvement in the case was clearly embellished. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica asked for my help. Her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. My job was only to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. I thought it would be a way to get justice, she explained. She then added that on the night of the attack, Michael told her the whole truth. As soon as I realized I was being used, I immediately went to the police. In addition, I feared for my life. There is no telling what they would have done to me. The woman's words were confirmed by the hotel's CCTV footage that showed Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel not at 11 p.m., as Michael himself said, but at 11:40 p.m. Her testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. Corey had long denied any involvement in the case. He knew what a guilty plea would do to a repeat offender, but Jessica did reveal her role in the sinister plan. To honor the young sergeant's memory, Nathan's family and friends gathered on December 7, 2010, in the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided to skip the ceremony. She was clearly not in the mood for it. In his speech, Eric Pate recalled, "My brother has always been an example for me and the rest of my family. Nathan truly loved life. He was devoted to his wife and children. Everything he did was for his homeland, love, and friends." On December 9th, the remains of Nathan were transported to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass took place at St. Francis Church in Tamuning. Military honors were paid at the Pai City Cemetery on Guam's island. His funeral? The cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. 6 officers carried a casket draped with a U.S. flag upon arrival at the burial site. Afterward, 21 shots echoed in the sky as Nathan was given a hero's farewell. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. The next day, Michelle Pett met the same fate. Police feared for her mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent suicide. On January 4, 2011, in Clark County District Court, charges were read to the 4 accomplices: conspiracy to commit murder and robbery with a firearm, murder with a firearm. Additionally, Michael and Corey faced charges for possessing firearms. The trials dragged on for 3 years as some defendants denied involvement. Armed with strong defense teams, they filed multiple motions aiming to exclude certain evidence from the case, yet each motion got rejected. Their strategies only delayed inevitable punishment by postponing sessions repeatedly. On September 21, 2015, the trial for Nathan Pett's murder began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez stood trial first and pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. An appeal against this sentence got denied later. At sentencing time, Michael showed no emotion or regret for his crime. Michelle Payer's trial happened 1 month later in a Las Vegas courtroom, a stark contrast as she insisted that she had reconsidered killing her husband. When the judge permitted Michelle to speak a few words in her defense, turned to the parents of the murdered man. With tears in her eyes, she apologized them. "I loved Nathan and our children. I was very confused and made a big mistake," Michelle stated, then fainted once again. The prosecutor asserted that she did not believe the defendant intended to thwart the conspiracy, citing considerable evidence to the contrary. It baffled everyone how a woman, a mother of 4 children, could become so cold-blooded. The judge sided with the prosecution, determining that Michelle was clearly more involved in the crime than she admitted in court. Michelle soon pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm. This plea helped her avoid capital punishment. The Pett family also requested that the court not impose the death penalty on their former relative. At the end of the hearing, the judge described Michelle's crime as incomprehensible and unfathomable. In October 2015, it was Corey Alexis Hawkins' turn in court. He also agreed to a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison. His attorney's petition for parole was denied because Corey had helped plan the crime and was present at the time of the shooting. Jessica Austin likewise took a plea deal with prosecutors and later faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, during Michelle's final sentencing, she cited her unstable emotional state as leading her to commit the crime once more and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness again. Carmelita Pete, who was deeply religious, recognized that her former daughter-in-law felt genuine remorse for her actions and believed that Michelle's soul needed forgiveness. Thus, Nathan's mother forgave Michelle in the courtroom. She added afterward that Michelle had already endured substantial punishment by losing contact with her children, who feared their mother might harm them too. Erichet informed her of this perspective. He believed Michelle was deeply shaken by her mother-in-law's words. Her family is now moving on without her, and the children will up knowing their mother is a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also felt the need to speak out. She told Michelle that she hated her and then added that Michelle dishonored the family name with her greed and love for a man she barely knew. Michelle had destroyed her own family. She became the murderer of the man she once loved immensely, with whom she shared a home and future. Could Michelle have ever imagined how her unchecked ambition would turn out? Hardly. People in this category often live in a perpetual pursuit of happiness without appreciating what they already have. Nathan, unlike Michelle, spent his whole life giving selflessly. Despite being sleep-deprived and risking his health and life, he fulfilled his beloved's dreams, yet never found recognition from her. The children of the Pett family will remain traumatized for life. It's doubtful they will be able to create strong families or socialize effectively. The painful experience of their parents' predicament will stay before their eyes forever. The case of Antonia Barra turned a holiday into an absolute nightmare. Alcohol, especially in large quantities, can truly be detrimental, impacting both the body and mind adversely. It's no secret that an individual in a state of severe intoxication becomes highly susceptible and can easily fall prey to robbers, fraudsters, rapists, and murderers. This vulnerability is particularly pronounced for women. What is also concerning is that criminals often attempt to justify their heinous actions by claiming intoxication or placing the blame on the victim. Consequently, many individuals who experience violence choose to remain silent, struggling with their pain and solitude. Some find ways to move forward, but for others, this weight becomes too heavy to bear. Antonia Barra's story exemplifies the devastating impact of silence and societal condemnation. It illustrates how an individual who caused immense suffering to numerous young women could go unpunished for too long. Her case shook the entire nation of Chile, sparking public outrage and leading to mass protests. It also highlighted flaws in the criminal system that allowed rapists' actions to be justified. The widespread response ultimately led to the removal of a dangerous criminal from society, thereby protecting other potential victims. Regarding Antonia Barra, she was born on December 3, 1999, in the city of Temuco, which is the administrative center of the same-named district in Chile. She was the youngest of 5 children in a well-off family, headed by Alejandro and Marcela Barra. Her siblings included 2 older brothers named Sebastian and Ignacio, and 2 sisters named Catalina and Carla. Among them all, Antonia shared an especially close bond with her sister Catalina. They were best friends and confidantes. Her parents invested significantly in the education and comprehensive development of their children. They were involved in sports and music activities, and all attended prestigious colleges following high school graduation. As the youngest child, Antonia received a lot of love and attention from her parents without compromising her academic performance. She excelled at school with aspirations of pursuing a career in tourism and exploring different parts of the world. In conclusion, Antonia Barra's legacy highlights critical societal issues regarding violence and justice, while pushing for meaningful reform within legal systems to protect vulnerable populations effectively. In 2015, a 15-year-old named Antonia met Martin Pronis on social media. Both resided in the same city, with Martin living not far from Antonia. He was 8 years her senior and at that time already divorced with a child. Details about his early life are sparse. Born in February 1992 in Temuco, Martin was the second of 3 children born to Ivan Pronis and Paula Dare. At the age of 20, he impregnated a schoolmate and married her to avoid scandal and penalties. This marriage dissolved shortly after their child's birth. Communication between Martin and Antonia occurred from 2015 to 2017 via social networks. The relationship remained purely platonic. Post-high school graduation, Antonia attended university in another city where she pursued studies in the travel industry. This transition ushered in new friends and hobbies for her. Martin faded from her thoughts. Antonia returned home only during vacations and holidays, but maintained regular contact with her family. At university, Antonia formed a close friendship with Consuela Urbe, becoming nearly inseparable companions. She also dated Rodrigo Aguad for about a year before they decided to take a break from their relationship in September 2019 at the start of the new semester. Following this breakup, Antonia felt distressed and sought distraction from her emotional turmoil. Coincidentally, an upcoming Chilean national holiday promised an extended weekend filled with various events. Seizing this opportunity, she and Consuela opted to attend an electronic music festival held in the scenic town of Pucón to unwind and rejuvenate. They traveled in Consuela's car, taking 3 additional university friends with them. In that city, there was a summer house owned by close friends of the Barra family. Though the owners were out of the city at the time, they kindly offered Antonia and her friend to stay there, informing them about the spare keys location. Upon arrival, their companions went their separate ways, while Ant and her friend settled into a large and cozy house for the weekend. On the evening of September 18th, during a walk around the city, Antonia accidentally encountered Martin. They engaged in conversation and discovered that Martin was also in town for the festival with his friends. They were staying in a rented house a couple of miles from the city center. The two had a pleasant chat and decided to meet the next day at a party scheduled to take place in one of the popular nightclubs. In a phone conversation with her parents, Antonia shared her plans. Her father sternly advised her to avoid excessive drinking and behave prudently. Laughing it off, she assured him everything would be fine. The next day, she and her friends spent hours preparing for the party, choosing outfits, applying makeup, and then headed to the club. Before leaving, they shared a bottle of wine and then took a taxi to the club. Once there, they ordered another bottle of champagne at the bar and enjoyed it together before heading to the dance floor. Around midnight, Martin and his friends arrived and quickly found Antonia. By then, both were already quite intoxicated but continued drinking and dancing. Consuela mentioned trying to dissuade her friend from drinking more, but Antonia didn't listen. At some point, Consuela lost track of Barra and began searching for her. She found her about half an hour later in another room with Martin. By this time, Antonia was heavily intoxicated and could barely stand. There, Consuela saw their classmate Benjamin Morales and asked him for assistance in taking Antonia home. However, Antonia resisted vehemently. She insisted on staying because the night was young. A few moments later, she felt unwell. Friends escorted Barra outside for fresh air before returning inside once more. Towards morning, feeling weary, Consuela approached again, suggesting they leave together as she needed rest. Yet Antonia chose to stay behind and continue partying. Urbe eventually abandoned efforts to persuade her friend any further. She took a taxi home alone and immediately went to bed upon arrival. What was meant to be a fun night had devolved into chaos. Around 6 in the morning, Benjamin observed Martin escorting Antonia out of the club. Martin was hugging and holding her as she was swaying from side to side. According to him, she seemed disoriented, and Panis exploited this situation. They lingered near the entrance because Antonia felt unwell. They waited for her condition to improve a bit. Eventually, Martin's friends joined them, suggesting they continue their party at a rented house. They called a taxi for transportation, but Barra and Pinus decided to walk due to Antonia's sickness and confusion. Their journey was captured by surveillance cameras. The footage revealed that Martin was leading a visibly intoxicated student who attempted to free herself from his hold. Along the way, they stopped at a 24-hour supermarket where Martin chose to purchase beer. The store was empty. At one point, he made an attempt to kiss Antonia. However, she pushed him away and turned aside. She clearly felt uncomfortable but couldn't leave or resist effectively. In this scenario, Pronus had the upper hand and continued to guide Antonia. By approximately 8 in the morning, they arrived at the rented house. The friends in the living room observed that Antonia appeared visibly upset. Yet due to her significant intoxication level, she couldn't articulate her distress effectively. Meanwhile, Martin persistently hugged her and attempted to kiss her repeatedly. Given that all other friends were also heavily intoxicated, no one intervened. Soon after, the pair moved into one of the bedrooms where Martin assaulted Antonia while she was still dazed and confused about what was happening around her. Despite trying to resist and asking him to stop several times, Martin ignored her protests completely. When festivities concluded, he rejoined his friends in the living room to continue celebrating. Antonia, however, remained in the bedroom. At around 9 a.m., she called Benjamin, desperately asking him to take her home. Benjamin could barely understand her because her speech was slurred. She was being continuously and couldn't clearly convey what had happened or where she was. Concerned, Benjamin informed Consuela about the call, suggesting Antonia might be in trouble and need assistance. Consuela then contacted Antonia herself. With significant effort, she managed to ascertain Antonia's location and went to retrieve her. Upon arriving at the location, she encountered Martin and demanded an explanation of his actions. Martin merely smiled and claimed everything was consensual. Inside one of the rooms, Consuela found Antonia in a distressing state, crying and desperate to leave immediately. Without hesitation, they headed home, where Antonia took a shower, despite Consuela's advice not to wash away potential evidence and to contact the police right away. However, Antonia insisted that no one should find out about what had happened. Later that afternoon, she phoned her parents, attempting to mask any signs that something was amiss. The following morning, the girl and her friends drove back to their student dormitory. Faced with depression, bullying, and a desperate act, Antonia hoped to quickly forget the nightmare she experienced in Pucan and to resume her previous life. She attended classes and spoke with friends, but only Consuela truly recognized her mental state. Sadly, Consuela's efforts were insufficient to prevent Antonia from slipping into severe depression. Antonia chose not to discuss the incident or file a police report, fearing public exposure of her ordeal. Despite her silence, rumors spread swiftly, becoming embellished with fabricated intimate details created by gossipers behind Antonia's back. People whispered, pointed at her, and laughed. A fellow student even confronted her publicly about the rumors. The breaking point for Antonia was receiving a call from her ex-boyfriend Rodrigo, whom she still loved and hoped to reconcile with. During the phone conversation, Aguad repeated all the rumors he had heard and coldly informed Antonia he no longer wanted to see or meet with her again. Though she cried and tried to explain that everything happening was staged, a ruse, Rodrigo responded with harsh words. He swore at her, insulted her character, and then abruptly ended the call. For Antonia, this conversation dealt an insurmountable emotional blow. On Saturday, October 12, 2019, Antonia visited her parents' house to spend time with her family. Relatives noticed a sadness in her eyes, yet she persistently claimed everything was fine. That evening, she posted a few childhood photos on her social network profile and included a melancholic message. The next day, after the family had dinner together, Antonia went to her room on the third floor of the house and stayed there. Approximately an hour later, her sister Catalina, with whom she had always been very close, checked on her. Antonia expressed a desire to sleep, asked Catalina to turn off the light and leave her alone. As Catalina left the room, she told Antonia that she loved her. A couple of hours passed before their mother, Marcela, went up to inform Antonia that dinner was ready. She knocked several times but received no response. Upon entering the room, she initially thought Antonia was asleep. However, when she touched her hand, she realized that Antonia had passed away. Marcela screamed for help. Everyone in the house rushed into the room. They immediately called an ambulance and tried to revive Antonia before medical professionals arrived. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. It was later determined that Antonia had taken a lethal dose of sleeping pills in an apparent decision to end her life. The investigation and initial attempts to hold the offender accountable were an immense shock to Antonia's family and friends, largely because many were unaware of her troubled emotional state. Barra's parents resolved to speak with their daughter's friends and classmates. They wanted to understand what had transpired. The rumors and gossip they uncovered were deeply distressing. Consuela offered insights into the situation, sharing all she knew. However, this wasn't sufficient for the parents. Hence, they decided to hire the best private detective in town to reconstruct the crime and gather evidence necessary for bringing the perpetrator to justice. Furthermore, Alejandro took it upon himself to publicize the case. Leveraging his connections, he organized a press conference where he disclosed, before numerous cameras, that his daughter had been forcefully taken and bullied, a trauma she could not endure. He emphasized that the individual responsible was still at large. The detective successfully pieced together the sequence of events from that tragic night and secured testimonies from several witnesses willing to testify in court. Among these witnesses were Consuela, Benjamin, and a few other university students. The Barra family made an appeal to the court, urging that Martin be arrested and face consequences for his actions. However, police officers determined that the evidence provided wasn't sufficient to detain Pronis. He maintained that everything happened by mutual consent, although he did admit that both parties were under the influence of alcohol. Additionally, the victim had not contacted the police. Martin stayed free, and soon he and his family filed a lawsuit against the Barra family. They accused them of defamation, harassment, and revealing their personal data and information. According to Martin's family, Antonia's relatives had slandered their son and brother. Pronis also opted to hold a press conference to present their side publicly. They claimed they were victims too, stating that Martin had been slandered, his honor damaged, and his reputation ruined. Pronis alleged that Barra disclosed their home address, phone numbers, and social media details, which led to Martin and his family receiving daily insults and death threats anonymously. They reiterated that Martin's guilt hadn't been proven and insisted everything occurred with mutual consent. Furthermore, they expressed readiness to defend Martin's case in court with full support from his family members. It's quite unexpected, but after the statement, the police decided to support the Pronis family. This shift made Antonia's relatives hold back from negative remarks about them and avoid sharing personal information. For the family, this was a significant setback. Despite this, they kept pushing for justice with public backing. Victims who had stayed quiet since Antonia's case gathered widespread attention. Soon, 8 more girls went to the police within a month. They claimed they had also faced harassment and violence from Martin, but had kept silent out of fear of judgment and scorn. One victim was just 13 years old when assaulted. As more girls who had suffered from Martin's illegal actions began contacting authorities one by one, he was finally taken into custody. He was arrested in June 2020 and sent to Tomoko City Prison under suspicion of assaults committed between 2011 and 2019. However, less than a month later, Martin's lawyer ensured that his client was released on his own recognizance for the duration of the investigation. Additionally, several lawsuits from the injured girls were rejected due to the statute of limitations of the crime, raising the likelihood that they would not be considered. Out of the 8 appeals, the court only registered 2 cases. The news of Martin's release and the dismissal of the victims' claims sparked public outrage. A wave of protests and rallies swept across the country, with thousands demanding justice in the streets. Responding to the public outcry, the prosecutor's office initiated a review of the case and called for a change in the suspect's measure of restraint, advocating for his return to custody. Simultaneously, the statute of limitations was lifted for all cases of violence committed by Pronis. Trial and sentencing occurred in February 2021. During this time, the suspect's messages on social networks, where he boasted of his actions to his friends, were exposed. It was discovered that Martin kept the underwear of his victims at home as trophies. Among these items were the underwear of victims who had previously appealed to the court, as well as an item belonging to Antonia. On August 26, 2021, the defendant was charged with 9 crimes against sexual integrity, 3 of which involved victims under the age of 18 at the time. Once again, the Barra family appealed to the public, urging them not to remain silent about the violence and to bring those responsible to justice. The hearings for the case began in June 2022, allowing Martin's lawyers time to prepare thoroughly. They presented witness statements and recordings from surveillance cameras, indicating that Antonia willingly accompanied the defendant and did not resist him. The defense also questioned the testimonies of other victims. However, in August 2022, the court found Martin guilty of 8 crimes against sexual integrity and of driving Antonia to a nervous breakdown, resulting in her passing away. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Pronis, along with his legal team, immediately filed an appeal. On December 29th, the Supreme Court appointed a new trial. In March 2023, Martin's case was transferred to public defense, where he maintained his plea of not guilty, shifting blame onto Antonia for the events that unfolded. However, on July 7, 2023, the defendant was found guilty again, but the 20-year sentence previously imposed on him was reduced to 17 years. This reduction took into account the 3 years that the defendant had already spent in prison, leaving him with only 14 years left to serve. Antonia's family expressed their dissatisfaction with this decision. In an official press release issued by the girl's father, it was noted that no punishment could ever bring back their daughter and sister to them. While the legal battles were ongoing, Antonia's family, along with other victims affected by Martin's actions, turned to public figures to advocate for women's rights. Collaboratively, They worked to amend the criminal code, specifically focusing on paragraphs related to sexual offenses. Their objective was to safeguard the rights of victims of harassment and sexual violence. This initiative was named the Antonia Barr Law and proposed the abolition of limitations for crimes of an intimate nature, as well as an increase in the sentence for a perpetrator if a victim's life ended as a result of the assault.